Hello and welcome to episode 188 of the Crate and Crowbar. My name is Chris Thurston and tonight I'm joined by Tom Senior.
Hello.
And Tom Francis.
Hello.
It's a two-Tom special on this, the 9th of May, the date that I forgot to say at the start of the podcast. News this week is still relatively quiet for news as people, as the big announcements are saved up for E3, but Risk of Rain 2 was announced this week.
Yeah, it seemed almost low-key, the announcement. The gist of it was they just kind of updated their dev blog and said, they've been like sitting on this for 6 months. They've been working on it for 6 months and haven't announced it until now. And it's 3D. They just went full 3D. So Risk of Rain was a side-on roguelike where every class you can play as is radically different. Like all of their abilities are fundamentally different to all the other classes. And you play on these weirdly not randomly generated levels, but they sort of look like randomly generated levels. Or I think maybe some elements of them are switched around, but mostly hand built. And the monsters are just in enormous hordes, and they keep coming. And some of them are like skyscraper tall, and you'll get like 10 of those. And it's about kind of managing those and figuring out the most efficient way to deal damage to them. And they've just gone full 3D for the sequel. So it's surprising how well the art style kind of carries across. They've done a good job of like capturing that in 3D, even though it was a pixel art style, and they're not doing like voxel art 3D. But it has a kind of quite flat shaded look. I don't really know how. I don't think you could just make the same game but in 3D. I think a lot of the way Risk of Rain worked was tied to the 2D-ness. Like the thing I really enjoyed about it was it had, there's basic attacks that just like fire projectiles or whatever, but I loved finding ways to affect like as many enemies as possible with my attacks. So I play as the mutant slime creature who's like one of his abilities was just to leave a trail of slime behind him. And so if you have enemies could just clip through each other in Risk of Rain. So you could have just a vast horde all clumped up in one tiny location. And if you walked through that with your acid slime, then they'd just all be taking all of that damage. And you like that feeling of knowing you were doing like the total damage you were doing to that many enemies was just insane. That was the fun of it for me. So
it's unacceptable for enemies to be that stupid in a 3-dimensional environment.
I think they can be stupid, but I don't think they can clip through each other. Or I think that would look weirder because in 2D you're not really thinking about it, but you can sort of imagine they're on different depth levels, right?
Yeah.
And then in 3D,
even though your attacks affect all of them.
Yeah, somehow.
You are infinitely wide.
An infinitely wide creature, and they're not. So that was like a sort of a fudge that worked, and they can't really do that in 3D. So, I mean, you could still make a game about being really efficient about dealing damage to clumps of enemies. But maybe that's not what they thought that game was about. Maybe that's only what I got from it.
I suppose the 3D, that is Serious Sam, pretty much. Like running around a big arena.
Yeah, that's true.
Hordes of enemies, doing damage in the most efficient way. That's what people remember about Serious Sam, efficiency.
The middle manager of FPSs.
Indeed.
Remember there's an interesting, I can't remember precisely how it works, but there was an interesting progression system from kind of level to level.
It had there was, the difficulty scaled up over time, not levels. So if you took a long time on the first level, it would get as hard as it's going to get on the first level. You didn't have to go to another level to meet the harder challenges. And so, there wasn't really any motivation to like scour the level. There's also, when you got to the end of a level, you sort of chose to trigger like a countdown thing. And so it didn't let you out right away. You had to sort of hold out for, I think, like 30 seconds or something, and enemies would pour in at an accelerated rate. And only then could you progress.
Does anyone remember why it was called Risk of Rain?
There was, I think some spaceship had broken up and all the stuff was like raining down on the planet, and that's where it was set. Like there were lots of things that, fallen down. I remember I did complete it, and there's something about like the last level is on the spaceship or something. I don't know if that made the title any more relevant, but I can't talk.
I think you can though. You've named games pretty literal things that are in that game.
Yeah, I guess like you can point a gun and gunpoint.
It's one of the. It was the mechanic for a while, right? Like very early on. Then no.
Then no.
Maybe when they first conceived Risk of Rain, it was a game about whether or not it was going to rain. And then after a while, it became a game about linking devices in a building. And the name Risk of Rain just stuck by that point. So there's no point changing it.
It almost works as a better name for Rain World. Like, Rain World's a perfectly good name for that as well, but that sounds like a game where it's really fucking risky to be out in the rain.
Actually, when this was announced, I thought that was what people were talking about. I completely, even though I played Risk of Rain, I completely forgotten that it had existed. And it's like, Rain World 2, that's an interesting time to announce that. The first one took long enough and it's only just come out. But that's not what happened. This is a story about me being wrong.
Risk of Rain 2 does sound like a, slightly wetter British summer than usual.
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't imply hordes of enemies and guns and,
Risk of Rain 2, increased chance of rain.
I mean, it's an old joke, but it is prime candidate for 2 Risk, 2 Rain.
That's true.
That fits perfectly in this particular context.
And also, like, Risk of Rain, Tokyo Drift, but like Tokyo aquaplaning because of all the water on the road.
Tokyo 42 2, Tokyo Drift.
If you like water
Tokyo 242.
For fuck's sake.
If you like drifting through water, though, it seems like the new Assassin's Creed allegedly might
Good link.
serve you well.
What, drifting?
Well, it's pretty much how their boats worked.
They're just aquaplaning on the sea.
That is a stretch, Tom.
Slam into a hard corner around an island, air assassinate an ocelot. Basically the same. But there is going to be more Assassin's Creed, it seems. Well, obviously there was always going to be more Assassin's Creed, but there's an image that is leaked that's been, seemed mostly confirmed to be correct, which confirms both an Egyptian setting, perhaps, and also boats, more certainly.
And a title?
Assassin's Creed Origins,
which is the worst. That is the actual worst that they've will they be the first series to complete subtitle bingo? Like, they've had Revelations.
Oh god, yeah.
They've had, so hang on, Brotherhood. No, Brotherhood's not that common. Revelations.
If they do Rising after this, then
yeah,
they've got it.
Well, Rise was the subtitle for Assassin's Creed 3.
That's true.
God.
Yeah.
So they're already mostly the way there. They had Unity, but that was just weird because it made it sound like
It was made in Unity.
it was made in Unity. Syndicate, which is just the name of a different game.
Unreal.
Speed Tree. But yeah, so Assassin's Creed Origins.
And it probably won't be released on EA's Origin service.
No, it'll be on Uplay's, Ubisoft's Uplay service. So, paving the way for, I don't know, Battlefront 3 Uplay.
I think the last I heard was that they sort of announced they were not going to do annual iterations for or like the next one is not going to be next year because we're going to take a break and rethink the series and try and make it like meaningfully different. And then they called it Origins. I mean, it wasn't the first one, Origins. I mean, it wasn't called Origins.
It was the original game.
Yeah.
I mean,
wasn't it kind of about like the start of the...
No, not really. They've been around for a while by then. Because the first one was set in the Crusades. So if this is ancient Egypt, then that's going to be comfortable. 2,000 years before the first one. But the bigger question is, does anyone care?
I could not possibly need more backstory of that. Oh, Jesus Christ.
That would be the logical backstory for a lot of the stuff in the... I mean, specifically Jesus Christ would be the logical nexus point for a lot of the Assassin's Creed lore.
I think I can't really fault them for whatever they do because fundamentally the thing I want from them is just not Assassin's Creed. Like the thing I want for them to do is just strip out all the future stuff and just make a purely historical game. Not about history particularly, but just set in historical places and make it entirely about that setting and not mix it in with this bullshit conspiracy, future time traveling, memory, DNA shit. But that's obviously not Assassin's Creed.
I'd love a proper combat system, which the game has never had. It's never had a good combat system ever. And it's all been about killing and, stabbing people. And that element of the game has always been really the worst part. And occasionally it would kind of, it's always meandered and adhered to, its templates, especially in its mission design. But it's never actually been systemically that interesting beyond the first game, which was one of the very, very early proper open city games, really, to actually make traversing open cities feel exciting and viable, and authentic. And that, the novelty of that made it special, but that faded very quickly as soon as, loads of other games caught up with it and made better games around that idea.
I would say that the second game had not systemic chops, but it had interesting, things you could do. It was fun to try and win a combat encounter without a weapon in your hands by disarming the first guy who to attack you, taking his sword and using it to kill somebody else.
That's true.
It wasn't like the combat itself was interesting, but like you could choreograph a kind of a cool moment. It was a game that allowed you to stand on the rooftops of Italy and throw broadswords at people.
Yeah, I mean, that was my preferred way of playing it. And that was a play style I was able to adopt. And I'd love that game forever for just letting me do that, even though it's stupid. I really liked Brotherhood, actually. That was the peak of the series for me. Because so much Assassin's Creed is about this historical setting, and Rome was just so exciting to me. And the idea that I could rebuild Rome, even though it was attached to a fairly tedious resource gathering game, still was exciting. And I loved building up my Brotherhood of Assassins who would just pop out of hay carts magically to stab people when I pressed Y. Made an eagle noise. That's brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, the series still has, I think the series still has potential, but for me it'll always be associated with that glut of open world games as well, which I don't necessarily like. I don't want the big box of every experiences that has a million different things to do in it. I'd quite like one really well crafted thing.
It is kind of interesting how that formula that was sort of maybe not started by Assassin's Creed, but kind of popularized by it became, it's a running joke now that like, even outside of Ubisoft's own games, other games will be accused of having the Ubisoft open world thing of all these icons on the map. And people are fatigued with it, but I also think a lot of that stuff came about through iteration on what was working and what people liked. And for everyone who's fatigued with it, there's probably 100 people who love that stuff. Or if they don't love it all, they love one particular thing. Like for all the people who don't want that much on the map being told about, there's, some people who just really want collectibles and they really want to know where those are. And then there's some people who really want, like, I personally love not side missions, but like sort of almost generated missions, like template missions. Like Assassin's Creed 2 did this where, just someone, a thief runs past and you have the opportunity to chase them down and get the money back. And it's basically purely systemic. Like that's just, it's spawned at a random place and he's going to a random place and he'll just figure out with AI how to get there, I think. Maybe there's just loads of preset ones, I don't know. And I love that because it felt organic and natural, and probably loads of people didn't give a shit about those things and wanted, actual side quests with story. And so they are, open world games have become the games that are trying to be all things to all people. And, it's remarkable how successful they've got at it.
I still wish that, a lot of the cool things about the series, like free running and stuff, ended up feeling really janky. And I think part of that was just games got way better at doing that stuff around the series. And also it just seemed like they stuck to the same sort of climbing systems throughout the entire series, and they couldn't really fix a lot of the problems with it. So the idea of a reboot where they could actually rebuild those systems from scratch is actually quite exciting, because I would put up with a lot of future bullshit if they had a fluid free running system that let me run over Egypt. That would feel great. Because their settings have always been really strong, I think.
The environmental design's always been amazing. It always feels like anything that can be produced to a high standard by like the biggest workforce you've ever seen, those games have always been really good at. That's true for Ubisoft generally. Yeah. Like I thought Ghost Recon Wildlands was garbage, but its environments were gorgeous, because its environments are what you get if you invest loads of resources and huge skilled art departments on just make a huge map. I mean, it doesn't make the game any better, but they can do that. But I feel like that sort of school of kind of like distributed, really heavily templated design has worn extremely thin now. Particularly unless the ways you interact with it are really novel, or like Far Cry, the sort of the basic, each, unit of game, each outpost is in itself satisfying to play through. I would rather things not be templated and not be sort of, generated missions, but, a structured. I'd rather now play the Assassin's Creed, which is just the 6 best assassination bits from what would otherwise be like a 40-hour open world thing. Speaking of Far Cry, weren't there rumours of a new Far Cry, or is that an untrue thing?
Yes, there were rumours. Yeah. Who knows if they're true? That it would be in the Wild West. And that was semi-backed up by the fact that a long time ago there was a survey on, like, where would you like the next Far Cry game to be? And one of those options was the Wild West.
That's a great setting for Far Cry.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see that. I guess it would inevitably bring Red Dead Redemption to mind. terms of that was an open world game in the Wild West. And feels like you got all the tools there. I mean, I'm a bit spoiled by Far Cry Primal because I think for me that's just the perfect Far Cry game, and I don't want guns back. I want to stay. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter whether they add it or not, because I would always just use a bow and a knife, and I'm sure they're always going to give me those things: a bow and a knife and rocks,
and a magic owl.
I didn't use the magic owl in Far Cry Primal. I was against the magic owl.
Big on bows, tough on owls.
That's the platform I ran on, and that's what I'm going to stick to.
Yeah, I'd be into this. I feel like if this is true, and obviously this is one of those, and if it's true things, given that Red Dead Redemption 2 is on the horizon, and given that, like, I don't know, at least High Concept TV has just had a bit of a run of Western things, Westworld just finished, that kind of thing. I wonder if by 2018 we're going to be, or even this year when E3 rolls around,
inundated.
Yeah, it's going to be the year of the cowboy. I wonder if that's where we're going. That's my early prediction.
It's about time, though, that happened. I mean, it's always felt like a bit of an underplayed...
I don't know, the stuff like Call of Juarez, that was a cowboy game. I mean, I know naming one cowboy game.
Occasionally, like, there was Gun, there was the Juarez series, and there was Red Dead. And beyond that, I was really struggled to pick out any proper...
I think Red Dead was so good that I didn't realise that there weren't any other cowboy games.
Yeah.
What was the really old LucasArts one? Outlaws? No,
I'm not sure.
Like a sort of, I think it was the build engine, like that kind of era.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. I think it was Outlaws.
So between those 5 games, it could constitute a genre over the period of 30 years.
I just remember there was a period of like 6 years or something where that was the game everyone was like, why aren't there more Wild West games? Yeah. That one was great.
So we could be about to, head right into the Wild West epoch.
Yeah, that's my prediction. And actually, the Wild West is perfect video game terrain, really, because, Westerns are about, functionally all Westerns are about people, the struggles people face maintaining their own codes of conduct in a lawless world. That's basically the thing that makes something a Western, apart from cowboys and revolvers and stuff. And that is basically the thing that all video games are about, even if they don't want to be. They're all about people who have to choose to adhere to a code of conduct and not at all. So, I mean, that Red Dead did that well, but I think, I'd be excited to see more games take on that territory, because it's a good fit for different types of games as well. It's a good fit for an open world game. It's equally a good fit for a narrative game.
It's a very good fit for Far Cry. It kind of solves a lot of the awkwardness of like Far Cry 3 and 4, where like the just having like loads of different bandit gangs who believe different things, and then business lords, business lords. What am I saying?
Invasion of the business lords.
The money kings.
The money kings.
They ride on the steel horse.
The giant robots.
The money king.
I'm just thinking of Will Smith in the Wild Wild West. That's what I'm thinking. Exactly. Giant mechanical spiders, as they were.
Is that the chief business lord of the Wild Wild West?
Once upon a time in the West, Jim West, Desperado,
giant spider. That's I mean, to be honest, that's not a terrible example of how that whole period of history has been so fictionalized in so many absurd ways that you can return to it in a video game and not hopefully cause too much cultural insensitivity, in the same way that Far Cry 3 and 4 accidentally did a little bit.
Yeah, indeed. Although I will say this, I guarantee you, now while I'm having this prediction, right? So I'm going to predict the year of the cowboy. I'm also going to say that when Far Cry Cowboys arrives, we are going to be having a conversation about their ill-advised, culturally insensitive POT sequence that will inevitably be in that game. I guarantee it. There's no way they're going to avoid that, because it is an obstacle directly in their track. And
they love their drug sequences.
They love their drug sequences. They love their, you are a outsider hanging out with an indigenous peoples of some kind, taking their local drugs and going on spirit journeys thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they do Cowboy Far Cry, there is no way they're dodging that.
Even though they definitely should.
Even though they definitely should. Yeah, it's not,
train wreck we can see a mile coming.
Exactly.
I retract everything I said. There are so many cultural sensitivities they could do.
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, it's
absolutely loaded with the...
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's so obvious that they'd fuck that up that they won't fuck it up. Surely.
I wouldn't put faith in that. I'm really excited about Red Dead though.
Me too. Yeah.
Terribly excited.
What is
not announced PC?
Remind me of the latest on that. Is the original still never came to PC, right?
No.
That's right.
And the second one is going to come to PC?
No, they've not said
I
anything
haven't
about
said.
it. No.
Okay.
But maybe if you're looking at the pattern of GTA 5, you might hope that would happen for PC.
I think it would be mad if it didn't, given how huge GTA Online on PC was
Yeah,
for
for
them.
sure.
Like, it might be another thing if it comes out 18 months later, but that said, this is not going to have been shackled to a console generation massively behind the PC. This will be a modern console game, which is not a million miles off. I'd be pretty surprised if it wasn't on multiple platforms, to be honest. It's not like Rockstar are doing anything else that they would be bringing it on PC, right? Like, to this, or they just don't release a game on Steam, which would be strange, I think, even for them.
Yeah, I'm very hopeful. I almost expect it, to be honest. I think there'll be a delay, but I personally think it will happen.
Yeah, it must be a huge... I mean, all the arguments I can say for why they would obviously do it are arguments that also would have applied to Red Dead 1 as well.
I suspect Red Dead 1 might have been a different case because, by all accounts, its development was quite fraught. It was one of those games that had to be... There's been multiple interesting Gama Sutra articles written about what it took to get that game out the door and the kind of development hell it went through. So maybe there's some technology reason why the work was never done to create a Windows version of it. I would suspect. Whereas with GTA, I think it was more straightforward.
Rockstar bought almost every game they've ever made. I mean, apart from Red Dead and maybe table tennis.
Yeah, I think that's the only two.
Almost everything else has come to PC. So hopefully,
yeah, it's very exciting because Red Dead Redemption is still my favorite Rockstar game by a mile. Like, I think it's so much better than any of the recent GTAs.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. For sure.
Yeah, it could, because I think it doesn't try and be kind of sort of acerbic in the way that GTA has been acerbic, which just doesn't work anymore for me. Whereas Red Dead has genuine heart. I kind of hope it stays like that. Like, I hope it's still a relatively serious story that allows you to be silly if you want, but is trying to be a serious Western, because that really suited the first game.
And I'm really excited about the prospect of an online version of that world where I can saddle up with some friends and go and kind of raid some bandits or something as a troop.
Yeah.
And rob the money lords.
Rob the money lords.
Rob the money lords, as you do in the Wild West.
Yeah, and they're giant metal spiders.
Yeah, absolutely. Take them all down. Lasso them.
Cool. So in terms of what we've been playing, I suspect this is going to be one big what we've been playing section, because we've all been playing the same game, and it's pretty easy to guess what we've been playing because we've all been playing Prey.
Yep.
Which came out, we talked about it on the pod last week. Well, you and Alex talked about it based on your experience of the demo. We've all played a lot more of it now. The game is actually out. Obviously, we're not going to do any spoilers in this section, partly because I think we're all at different stages of it.
Yeah.
But also, it feels like prime material for a spoiler cast at some point. A bit like we did with Dishonored, because,
I think I'm close to the point that I could do a spoiler cast, but not there yet.
Yeah, it's also one of those games that given that it is like System Shock and BioShock, it has a style of storytelling which is big on slow burns and then big reveals. And you go over these sort of thresholds in your understanding of what's going on that it'd be easy to spoil for people.
Well, that's good to hear, because I'm like 4.5, 5 hours in, and I was wondering whether it had that capacity.
Yeah,
so I'm glad it's got some kind of bases up its sleeve.
Yeah, the space business. The space business going on in space.
Excellent.
So it's been interesting because it's been interesting watching the reaction in our little private chat where we talk about games, because I really, really like it, and I still really like it. But I think that game evolves a lot over the course of your time with it.
Yeah,
and like I didn't cool on it. I cooled on it to the point where I think it's still an excellent game, but I'll be interested to hear what your kind of journey with it has been and where those kind of rough edges have started sneaking. Because I've seen this in a lot of different people's impressions of it. The way the game it turns out to be is quite different from the game it starts as.
Yeah, my first 10 hours with it were just fantastic, and I was completely in love with it. I'm a huge System Shock 2 fan, and it is incredibly faithful to System Shock 2.
Yeah.
It sort of models itself after that game shamelessly and religiously. And my thought, during those first 10 hours was like, not only is this amazingly faithful to System Shock 2 and like in a sort of updated way, but I think it might be better than System Shock 2. Like it's just sort of fixes a bunch of things that were wrong with System Shock 2. And in particular, the thing I really love about it that System Shock 2 almost had and BioShock didn't really have, is that this place, this space station is, you can go everywhere in it and you can also go around it from the outside and you just have access to all of it. It's just all there and there's nothing hidden from you and it feels extremely ungamey in that way. I'm so used to the game world being like, oh, we're suggesting it's a city under the sea, but you can only go through these levels and they form a kind of snaky path through the whole thing. And that's the part you're allowed to play in and everything else will imply it's there, but you don't get to go to it. This really is, I don't think there's any part of the station you can't go to and you can fly around it and just look at it and just see where everything is. And it's all just completely cohesive and interconnected and, you get the whole thing. And that's also backed up by and sort of reinforced by one of my favorite features, which I don't think I've seen done in a game like this before, where every human on the station is named and there is a list of them on the security terminal. And not only can you see all of their names, but you can also just click on one and say, where's this guy? And it will just give them a quest marker to where that person is.
Even if they're dead.
Yeah, especially if they're dead, which most of them are. Yeah. Actually, they are tracking bracelets that you're tracking. So sometimes you find the tracking bracelet, not the body, but I'm pretty sure the body is always there. Like there's always, and it might not even be technically on the station. But that, even though I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to hunt down every single one of them because there's fucking hundreds of them. The fact that it's telling me they're all there and I believe it, just adds so much to this place. I really feel like it's so kind of, authentic, I think there's another word for it, like is verisimilitude the word I'm looking for, like this kind of the one-to-one relationship between what it's saying it is and what it really is. Like the simulation matches the fantasy.
I think that's my impression of its early hours as well. And actually, to be honest, it keeps this up. There's an astonishing attention to detail in the way that world is built and the way it's simulated, and those two things are kind of linked to each other. Like, it's, I think one of the reasons maybe, not to skip ahead too much, when it starts to not quite stick to its own logic a little bit, it stands out more, even though it's probably, even in its worst moments, being less gamey than most games. Because at its best, in Prey, you don't necessarily have to engage game logic to solve problems. You can trust that its attention to detail is sufficient that if you think you can do something, that will probably work. Like, for example, you get told, you read an email that says this guy stole something and he's gone missing. And then if you choose of your own initiative to go and find a security terminal and look for his name and his tracking bracelet, you can find out where he is, and that's right. And the game, it gives you the information on multiple levels. Like if you follow the kind of rigid quest steps, it will tell you explicitly go and do this. But if you just go and do it on your own bat, that will happen.
Yeah, exactly that, where that was sort of the defining arc of my early experience. So I played the demo, which is, they call it the first hour, although I spent probably an hour and a half on my first playthrough and then 2.5 hours on my next playthrough of it. And then I got the full game and I played that same area and spent about 5 hours on, not the exact same stuff, because in the demo, it's it's kind of split into areas where there is a loading screen between them. But each of those areas is usually a hub with loads of stuff to do and loads of individual sections and bits of the ship. And in the demo, there's the first 2 of them. But once you leave the first one, in the demo, you're not allowed to go back, but in the full game you are. It's just an artificial demo restriction just to make sure you can't, to prevent you from getting to some stuff there. And in those first 2 sections, I just spent 5 hours going back and forth between them because, I've heard the word Metroidvania used in reference to it. It's not really like that in most ways. It's not about gating you by, you don't have this ability, so you can't do this. Because I actually don't like that. That's one of the reasons I don't really get on with Metroidvanias usually. This is much more like, you don't have the keycard to this place. It's logical that you wouldn't have the keycard to this place. The keycard exists somewhere. If you ever find it, you'll be like, oh shit, I should go back there and check that out. And sometimes you don't have the keycard to this place, but you see another way in. And I just kept finding little threads that, like you say, mostly some of them are side quests and will be explicitly you'll be pointed to them, but often I got to them before I was supposed to. And I think still probably my favorite experience of the game is just going back to that, going to the second area, then going back to the first area and just realizing, oh shit, I can get in here now. I think I didn't have the keycard. I think I found some other way of getting in there. And it was just so clearly a place I wasn't supposed to be. It was just, I was so out of my depth. It was like, there was a thing in there that I was just like, oh my fucking God. And just being terrified of that thing and trying to creep around and explore that place without like daring to risk the wrath of this completely unknown creature was awesome. And actually, it happened to be a creature that I'd heard some things about. I won't say what, because it's better to know nothing at all. But even knowing the things I knew, it was still terrifying and mysterious to me. That was such a sort of electrifying experience. Just, I was so immersed in it at that point. And in general, just I spent a huge amount of time in this game, like pursuing what feel like my own leads. Like there's just, I can get to the trauma center, but there's a guy called DeVries whose office is locked. And I don't think anyone was telling me to go in there, or there was anything pointing me in there. I think it turns out like there is something that quest related in there, but I was just like, I want to get in there. And, oh no, I know what it was. I was looking for someone else. And I couldn't find them in the trauma center, but I knew they were supposed to be in the trauma center. As it turned out, I'd missed a clue in that quest. But my thought was, oh, there's one door I can't get in here. I want to get in there. And it's this guy's office. I'm going to look up where this guy is. And it marks him on my map. And I'm looking it marks him in the game world. And I'm looking at where he's in the game world. Like, how is he there? Like, yeah. And puzzling that out, like, it took, I kind of tried to pursue that manually, and then eventually, you got loads of other things going on, so I kind of put it on the back burner. And then when, like 7 hours later, I found the guy. I'm like, it's DeVries! I found DeVries!
I think I'm still in the kind of honeymoon period of that first 10 hours, and I'm having exactly that kind of experience where I'll be on a side quest and, go through an airlock and go into, a hull breach where there's just loads of stuff floating around, and I'll recover my objective, and then just like I fix a pump in there because I can, and it says, oh well, we've sucked out, we've restored the atmosphere to this corridor, now you can access like beams and waves lab. I was like, there's no way I'm not fucking going to the beams and waves lab.
I remember, I think I screenshotted that slide because I'm like, that is the most exciting door I've ever seen.
I was like, drop everything. I don't know who I am or what I'm doing here, but drop it.
If this room doesn't have a laser gun in it, then I'm funding this game.
And it might have a laser weapon in it a little bit, but that alone was really exciting because it forced me to go back through areas I'd already been through. And as you get to know the enemies, increasingly they do become more interesting. One of my frustrations is the combat generally, but as a piece of architecture to explore, I can't remember the last time I was as excited about the space as since Dark Souls or something like that. Like I'd absolutely love backtracking and what that does to this.
In terms of being a world that's interconnected, it's actually Dark Souls is a really good comparison because Dark Souls has that thing of when you realize that you look up at that castle wall from the Firelink Shrine, and that's a real place. That's not just a bit of environment art. You will be at the top of that wall eventually, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It has that sort of sense of like, oh, I can't get there now, but I will be able to.
Yeah, I had this thing where I did the same thing where in the very first area I went into the security room and you look at, everyone on the station. It tells you, I was similar like Tom, I was amazed. I was like, is this real? Or is a lot of this just fluff? And I noticed that like loads of people are alive in a particular area. I was like, wow, that's going to be really exciting. I'm going to get to meet people in this game, which is one of the things that Prey has way over BioShock and other games that hold you off from meeting people all the time. Prey is very kind of increasingly happy to let you meet people and make decisions about their lives and stuff, which is very exciting. Yeah. So then I kind of ended up, went through the first airlock, which isn't too far in, and just looked up, and I could see the zone where all those people were, and it's like really high up. And that just made me so excited to explore the rest of the game, knowing that in 10 hours I'm going to get to meet loads of people in there, and that's going to change the game completely. It's so exciting. I would stress that, like, when I talk about the game changing, I think it's less of a case of a honeymoon period. For me, what it was is the game evolves from being like a survival horror where you feel like a trespasser everywhere you go, to being more like a kind of creative shooter where your own power level increases quite a lot. That's, I think, not a spoiler to say, because they've done plenty of stuff about the kinds of ways you can upgrade yourself later in the game. So I found that where I'm at now with it, I feel like I have, and I think this is accounted for in the plot. I don't feel like it's undermining the story the game's trying to tell, but I'm no longer like hiding from the monsters so much as I'm figuring out the best way to clear this room or this area. And it's a change of tone. Like, I don't think that's actually totally alien to the genre necessarily. Like, I think it's more successful than BioShock in the sense that, you do have these big climactic encounters with, significant enemies.
and I've had to approach each of them in a slightly different way, or use my skill set in a different way. Whereas I found with Bioshock, where Bioshock revolves around those big daddy fights, I often discovered that you could do all of them the same way, pretty much. Like, the lightning trap bolts and the shotgun were both totally overpowered against them. So, whereas I haven't found anything like that in Prey yet so much, like, or at least every encounter's felt like it's taken place in an area where I can do something interesting. Whether that's involving the sort of slowing time power or the hacking and other things you can do. I don't want to spoil many of the powers, but there are interesting, I've won fights in that game in ways that I've never won a fight in a different game, in kind of using the mad powers you get given, that kind of thing. But where I'm at with it now, man, it's hard to talk about the spoilers, but like where I'm at with it now, I'm at a point where those characters that you meet aren't seeing me like a kind of another survivor kind of crawling through this station, but like more of a kind of like, holy shit, like what the hell are you kind of thing, which changes the feel of the game, I think, quite a lot. And it becomes at that point more about exploring and solving problems and prioritizing and following your own leads and sort of trying to make the right decisions and toy with your freedom rather than just getting by.
That's a really exciting transition.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. One of the things I love most about it so far is that it's taken a lot of the same mechanics that I've played with a lot in Dishonored 2 and Deus Ex in the last year. So it's hacking through doors, it's finding vents, and it's all of the pretty staid stuff by now in this genre. And in a kind of entirely sandbox environment where you're backtracking a lot and remastering areas, those techniques and those mechanics work so much better for me than it does in those games where, for example, in Dishonored 2 or Deus Ex, you're going to go out on this long mission that's going to last an hour, and it's going to be obviously it's a sandbox still, and there are multiple ways to approach it, but it's almost like still a tunnel. You're either in I'm in the stealth bit of the tunnel, or I'm in the combat bit of the tunnel, and then you'll get to the cutscene at the end, and then it'll reset you. Whereas with Prey, and with System Shock 2 as well, it was about building a skill set and then increasingly mastering the areas in lots of different ways. So like a little vent, it won't be the entire path for a mission. I won't feel like, I've done the stealth way to do this. It's like, here's a way I've discovered to circumnavigate threats I don't care about in this area. Or if you find turrets, activate those and set them up and kind of create safe zones for yourself in the station. It becomes a place where you live and you kind of inhabit and you impose your personality on it in the way that you navigate it and organize it.
I think that's a really good way of demonstrating the way it shifts, actually, because like I remember the first time I took on basically an enemy larger than a mimic, I really planned for it. And like, it was just after I discovered that you can pick up the turrets. Yeah. Like, they turn into sort of briefcase-sized toolboxes that you can carry and set up in different places, and set them up and created a trap, and then hauled loads of explosive barrels into the doorway that the turrets were pointing at and made a pile of them so that when the enemies like chased me into the path of the turrets, the turrets would shoot the barrels and the barrels would go up. Because I didn't have a gun at the time. It was like proper full on, how do I solve this problem using only my wits? And then so 10 hours after that, I'm setting up, as a matter of habit, setting up turret nests to hide in if something goes badly wrong. And then it does do things like it does respawn enemies. But one thing I noticed that it does, which is, I think, makes that forgivable, at least to me, is what it does is it tries to give you the impression that if you've left an area and come back to it, that stuff has happened in that area. So you'll see, like, the influence of the aliens has expanded visually in the area in the time that you've been gone, and they trash your turrets while you've been gone as well. Which is a sort of, an interesting thing, because you've got to then prioritize whether or not you want to bother setting that back up again or not, or save your spare parts and your repair gear for the next area you enter. So yeah, I found that side of it's been consistently interesting. I think there's some ways in which I think it plays against itself a little bit. Like, I think the aliens are actually laudably alien. The stuff in the fiction that is mirrored in the way that they react to you in the game. No, nothing spoilery, but they're not human. They don't really see like humans or, assign value to things like humans do, which means as a stealth enemy, their perception is very hard to judge what they can see, even in some cases which direction they're looking. It reminds me of discussions that the Alien Isolation developers had, where because their alien doesn't have eyes, they had to figure out which direction does it look in? How does it see? And they figured out that it was easier for everybody if you just pretended it had a 90-degree vision cone in front of it like anyone else. Because even though that doesn't actually make any sense, it fits the players. Right, It fits the player's sense of what's happening. Whereas Prey doesn't quite do that. And so sometimes a mimic will or won't react to you and you won't be necessarily sure why. Similarly, the way they move is weird. They don't tend to just run around. They teleport and shift and kind of dash and double back on themselves and split in two. They do a lot of weird shit rather than just move. And that means that they often struggle to chase you because they're too busy moving in a mad way. And I think that sometimes hurts it a little bit because it's weird because I think they're effectively alien, and that's rare enough in games that the aliens aren't just weird looking people with guns.
Yeah. It's like, here's the rhino type. Here's the dog type.
Yeah, exactly. They do feel like creatures that you can't ever quite predict what they'll do. So you'll shoot one with a Nerf dart in the hope that it'll chase you into your turret nest, and it just kind of won't. Like it'll just go like, and like look around a bit and then bugger off. And there's no reason why in the sci-fi setting, there's no reason why that doesn't make sense. It's not like a human enemy would, they shouldn't necessarily be expected to behave according to human priorities. But the fact that they don't, and there are emails and things that seem to explain that they definitely don't for a reason. It seems sort of doesn't quite fit. I think it's one of the reasons the combat doesn't feel quite as good as it could either.
Yeah, I've really cooled on it after that first 10 hours, and it's not because it hasn't gone back on any of the kind of promises it made. Like that place is really coherent, and I'm still really enjoying that part of it. But I'm just I find myself increasingly irritated with the combat, and it's that tricksiness of the enemies I just find it irritating. Like
I think it's really bad in first person. I think it was third
mimics
person.
Jump around all the time. Mimics, obviously, their main thing is they disguise themselves, and you get better ways of dealing with that, but it still basically means you just have to take things really slow, or you might get jumped in the face by a mimic. And they're actually not common enough that it's really worth taking things slow all the time, at least if you're as impatient as I am. And so I often just stop taking things really slow. Either I take it really slow and I get bored, or I don't take it really slow and then a mimic jumps in my face, and it's not catastrophic, it's just irritating. And then a lot of the enemies teleport or they fly, and I keep having things where I'm like, maybe it's the alien thing you're talking about, but I'm fully behind something and I get spotted by an alien. And so, yeah, the main thing I would say is that it's, the tool set seems really suited to the kind of game I like, where it's all about setting things up and here's how you prepare for an attack and get it right. And then the enemies seem designed to ambush you in a way that doesn't give you chance to react. And sometimes even just the level design, like there are a couple of times where you go through a level transition, and as soon as you're in the level transition, there's like a whole bunch of really tough enemies right in front of you. And there's a bit like that where I just had to load a save game like 6 times before I got to found the right combination of stealthing and moving that they didn't immediately spot me. And if they immediately spot me, then it's just outright combat, and I just don't have anything that makes that satisfying. And it's so rare in general in the game for me to have a really like satisfying encounter where I just dealt with it cleanly. Even when I do, it doesn't feel good because they do all these weird things. Like when a mimic is fighting you, I had so many fights with mimics early on where I thought shit, I got really fucked up there, and I look at my health and I'm at full health, and they actually never hit me. But when they get close to you, your vision blurs in a way that feels like you're getting hit, and you can't really see what they're doing a lot of the time, and it just has this kind of messy, fiddly feel to it. And at the first, I think that's quite, like I say, it's alien, and that's a good fit for the theme. And so early on, I was more forgiving of it. But now that the kind of alienness has worn off, I'm just kind of irritated by it. I'm just finding it's more of a slog to get anywhere because there's just so much of it.
I think I haven't put any points into the combat discipline, but I went big on engineer early, which meant that I have really upgraded a shotgun, which is now amazing.
That's what I've done. Yeah.
And I really and I always have, you have your power bound to your right mouse button, and I have mine on the slow time power.
Yeah. That sounds
like whenever I'm not doing something else. And so when you get those moments of a mimic jumps you, I sort of instantly slow time, and I feel like I'm quite good at dealing with it now. Or if you get jumped by something bigger, you can often deal with it, and you kind of learn how they move. I've enjoyed that side of it. You kind of know that some of the aliens will try and teleport through you, so you can kind of shoot them once and then spin around and you'll catch them when they're on the other side. And so there's stuff you can learn, which, I think helps. But actually, all of that stuff is only possible if you are using that slow time power, which actually feels like the thing that almost fixes the combat system a little bit, because it's so based on these kind of sudden encounters. Yeah. You can do some interesting things to plan for stuff, but
I got that power in the demo because I thought that might sort of fix the combat, but the problem was that I think the points I needed for it I only really got at the end of the demo, so I didn't get a chance to try it out that much. And what I did learn about it was that it uses your psi points, which at the time I had no way of replenishing, and they don't regenerate naturally. And so in the demo I learned, that power's not really worth it. It's just, so I haven't got it in the full game. But actually, now you mention it, that probably would solve some of my problems.
It's really good. And like, one thing about it that so I think I went through a little phase where I wasn't sure what kind of game it was becoming when it was in that transition point between the survival horror game and the action game, or the, sci-fi action game it becomes, where I started to realize that like, I had been hoarding my stuff like a survival horror player, but it was just giving me so much stuff.
Yeah, I've got so much stuff.
Like eventually ammo, side points, armor, your suit value, that stuff becomes much less of a concern because you get upgrades that allow you to replenish your pools a lot easier. Certain types of ammo can be tricky, but you can fabricate it if you're diligent about that. It even allows you to fabricate skill points to a degree. Like it really opens up. And at that point, as soon as I sort of got up to speed with the idea that, okay, this game is now about me being quite powerful, actually. And there are interesting things. There are reasons I want to go back and replay it, which we'll probably have to talk about in a spoiler pod. But like, it felt like, okay, that's what this is becoming. This is now a game about, like, this is now the game about being able to splash my powers around, not feeling like every side point I spend is going to be something I regret if I end up hitting something scary around the corner. Sort of no spoilers, but it has a moment that is I believe, an explicit tribute to a famous bit in the first BioShock game where someone plays music and then attacks you from all sides and you've got a shotgun. I don't know if you've found that in Prey. Where I was like, this is being that. And it's a very unsurvival horror moment because it's almost like a violent dance where you're using weapons and powers to sort of, conquer quite a tough combat encounter. And that, I think, is a very different game to the one it starts out as. But I still really liked it. There's some, fun powers in that regard. The phase shift power is really good. The teleport is really good. It's not a spoiler to say that you get the mimic power yourself, right? Because that's in
it's the first trailer.
It's in the first trailer. And then it levels when you can mimic turrets and just be a turret. That is fun.
When you're a turret, can you move?
Yep.
Can you shoot?
Yep.
Do you,
yes.
How do you move?
You hop. Like, well, how do you move when you're a roll of tape?
Usually you tumble over, so I'm wondering, can you
I think you can hop along. Like,
have you ever seen mimics do that? Because they do that.
Yeah, they do pretend to be
impersonate a turret.
Yeah, no, they don't impersonate turrets, but you see them as a little object trying to hop away from you.
Oh, right.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
If they think you're not looking.
Yeah, I suppose I'm a bit of an outlier in that. I think that, I still like the mimics, as an enemy because, so the thing the game does really early and it keeps this up, but I think your pace of exploration naturally accelerates as you go on for various reasons. You initially start out like, wow, this is amazing and threatening and I'm going to pore over every detail. And then as you get more comfortable with the setting and everything else, you just naturally start going faster. And that means I think you start hitting the mimics without considering them.
Yeah.
Whereas early on...
And I have it especially when backtracking, because I'm just like, I just want to get back to place A, where I already know, and I clean this area out, but now there's mimics again.
But there's loads of really good examples, particularly early, where the mimic puzzle is solvable. Not just by, going slow enough that you see them shake, or the little effect that gives them away. It's, you can look in a room, the first few times you encounter mimics, they're explicitly disguised as something that you should be able to tell as doesn't belong. So you'll go into a room and it's like, for some reason, this is a space station where people need explosive canister dispensers. But like, there'll be one too many explosive canisters in the room. And that's
two chairs at a desk.
Two chairs at a desk. That's what tells you one of them to mimic. And I love that that's what I talk about attention to detail. Like, I love that kind of environmental storytelling. Like, I think there's one where there are two identical photos on a desk, and that's what gives it away. And then you've got the glue gun very quickly, and you just fire a blob of glue at them, and they can't transform. And you've solved the problem. And you don't get XP for individual kills, so that's you're done. You don't have to kill it. You've solved their mimic puzzle.
I really like that because I would often have a hunch about like, oh, there's two of those things. I'm not sure there should be two, but I don't know which one's a mimic. So I like foam them both, and then you like after you've done it, you still don't know if you solved it. Like, it doesn't tell you. you got it right. It's just,
Yeah.
if they don't transform, I mean, they won't transform either way. If they weren't a mimic, they won't transform because they're not a mimic. If they were a mimic, they won't transform because you've glued them. It's like the witch test in that way. The explosive barrel gets foamed either way.
Just throw both chairs into a river. Which one floats?
The other thing you don't know is, was there ever a mimic? Is there a mimic in the room? And if those two don't transform, but you think there is a mimic in the room, then something else is going to turn into a mimic. And
there are sound cues as well, little sound cues.
That was fun early on when I had the patience for it.
Yeah, no, I think that's the thing. Like, I think weirdly, like, the game would also work were the mimics more like an Alien Isolation style threat, where there was only a few of them and they were a huge deal if they were in the level and they could disguise as anything. That would make it more explicitly a horror game. Like, Prey has horror elements, but I don't think it's really a horror game. In the same way that System Shock has horror elements, but it's not like full on a horror experience.
Yeah, actually, the thing I would like is if there was like a little like I say, you do get a way to deal with them better, but the thing I would like instead is an alien style radar beeper thing where it just goes beep just to tell you there's one somewhere.
Yeah,
nearby.
I mean,
and it, like if there's 3, then I want to hear 3 bips, so you know there's 3, but you don't know where they are, and then it just tells you, okay, be careful here. And
yeah, that'd be fun. Like there's the I don't know, the thing I like about it is that all this stuff, there is loads of logic in the game that you can use to your advantage if you choose to do so. So like turrets can see mimics. They just can see them. So I spent the first part of the game married to a fucking turret who went everywhere with me. And I would set her up in the doorway to any room I was going into just to let her have a look first. And then you'd hear the kind of like, Typhon detect, and then it'd be gone.
I had a brilliant moment where I was in some vents and a mimic was alerted and popped out of cover and then fled away from me into a room, a medical facility, just these little small medical rooms you can find. And they're populated by med drones that can heal you, but they sort of comment on stuff around them, and it said, obstruction detected. I was like, shit, that's where it is. Yeah. And the robots and the things around you really do react to mimics and to other enemies, and you can get a lot of kind of intel about them from the sound design, which is good because most of the sound design, I hate the music and a lot of the sound in it. Actually, I think like a lot of the audio cues are like really too loud and too aggressive.
Yeah, the mixing is really gone wrong. Like I think there's some code that's not running right or something, because I had like all important dialogue halved in volume at some point, and now it's just permanently stuck at low volume. I've got a voice volume of maximum, and that means robots that walk around and say something is deafening. Right. But when people actually communicate with me to tell me important plot stuff, I can't hear it over the noise of everything else. Yeah,
the similar with whenever a mimic decloaks, it gives you a massive, like incredibly loud audio cue, which is useful. You need to know that something is decloaking behind you. And a lot of the frustration I have with the combat is that it deals with your first person perspective terribly. It really kind of abuses your limited perspective. And especially a part of that is the distortion effects they give you when you're fighting something. Yeah, it's just a shitty thing to do in a FPS, to just, now you're in a fight and you can't see as well because there's loads of static in your view, and it's irritating and it just doesn't really make any sense. So I hate that. And also enemies that teleport through you and attack from behind you. In an FPS, I've no idea how a control pad player is supposed to play this. Yeah. And it's annoying enough with a mouse and keyboard. But that type of design feels shit in an FPS setting. And it feels like if it was a third person game where you have that little bit of extra peripheral awareness, that stuff would be stuff you could react to. Whereas in Prey, it feels consistently irritating. And I've constantly been killed because they do so much damage to you. Like if you take a shot unawares from a direction you haven't seen them coming from, that's instant death. And I've had loads of deaths where I've just been attacked from, I guess, a mimic or something while I was fighting something else, and it's just one hit me, and I've had no indication that it was there. And that's just really bad. That's just really annoying.
I feel like it's weird. Like I almost wonder if that slow time power should be built in, because I've had it from the start and it's so helpful.
When I bought it in the demo, I was hoping it would be like an automatic thing, like it just kicks in when there's combat or something. That would be great.
But now it's almost automatic for me now. Like I slow time because I have a big enough psi pool now that slowing time is cheap. So it's like I slow time and then set up what other power I'm going to use.
Yeah, the psi cost would be no issue to me now because I'm just psi rich. The resource glut thing is a real it's a problem that like lots of these games try and solve, and none of them really do. And it's just insane in Prey. I've never had resource glut like this. I just have infinite everything. Like I've got like 56 psi hypos, and they're used automatically. So effectively my psi pool is like 56 times, well actually I don't know how much they regenerate.
65 points.
But actually like fairly cheaply I can upgrade how much they regenerate to like double. Yeah. And so that would just double my total size stockpile, which I'm sure will never run out, even if I'm wildly liberal. And I have my number of medkits has just gone up steadily over the whole course of the game. So I've got like 30 of those now. I've got like 28 level up points spare. Like I will spend them, but I'm just like, I went through a period of, not having like a thing I was desperate to unlock. And so they stacked up for like, an hour of play. And that means I've got 28 spare now.
Yeah, I find the resource economy still fundamentally quite annoying in Prey, even though I think it does it a lot better than other games. So there's stuff I really like. I like the idea that you can convert any item into stuff. I love the way it shows you that. It's really so satisfying.
It comes out of these like cubes and spheres of
beautifully
like
textured.
Yeah, I think there must be like more than one per type, right? Because I'm looking in that bin and there's like 17 different kinds of orbs and cubes.
all sort of inherit the qualities. Like if it's sort of plant matter, it's sort of planty, and if it's like a silver.
There's one that looks like a ball of yarn or something.
Yeah, and which is lovely. I love that you get to see that. I love the way when you craft something, you get to see this amazing machine make it and then spit it out in front of you. However, it's ultimately still been frustrating for me where I've chosen that my style at the moment is just shotgun. I've massively upgraded my shotgun. Love killing with things with the shotgun. Feels great. There aren't many shotgun shells in the world outside the first area, I can tell. So I'm just having to constantly go back and craft them over and over again because that's the linchpin of the way I want to play this game. And maybe it's trying to get me to try other ways of playing it. Maybe I should upgrade a pistol or something, but I just don't have any other way of dealing with a lot of the enemies at the moment because I'm still in the first 10 hours.
I think that's the thing. You will eventually. I've moved on. I've got an amazing pistol now, and so I tend to use that a lot from a different thing. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting game because I do think actually that it is better than System Shock in a whole bunch of ways, from the depth of its simulation to kind of what it allows you to do to the amount of different creative things you can try that work. And in some cases, its problems, where its problems emerge from the fact that it's given you too much freedom and it's let you kind of sequence break things a little bit or that kind of thing. I'm inclined to forgive them, or even, things like the resource glut, which stem from ultimately probably a desire to not hem your options in too much. If you play diligently, it just gives you loads of stuff. So there's probably interesting resource scarcity if you're rushing, but if you take your time, it gets a lot easier.
Yeah. I often think, why not just give the player the thing that they found? Why not just give me the ability to shoot my shotgun in combat?
Yeah, I think I think there are interesting moments when you run out. I think that does create sort of.
I feel like they're not worth the admin of picking up plant matter to go to find a machine and then spend things on repairing it in order to.
I think it's because they want you to value all the other kinds of loot. They want because that's loot is the reward for almost everything. It's like if you do a quest, you get some loot. If you look in a secret area, you get some loot. Yeah. And because they don't know what kind of loot you value. If they give you a way to recycle everything into anything, then they can hope that when you find this bunch of junk, you can convert it into something else.
Well, it feels like, focusing neuromods are what's really important.
Yeah.
Frankly, that's the real currency of the game.
Yeah.
And the rest, why make you melt loads of stuff into blocks to feed the rest of that stuff?
I mean, there are things I love about that idea though, like the fact that there isn't a standard grenade in the game. What you have is a recycler charge that does the same matter recycling thing to whatever you throw it at, which is both a crafting thing. Like if you can't find a recycling station, but you've got an inventory full of junk, it's sometimes worth sacrificing a recycler charge.
Just drop it all on the floor. And
put stick a recycling charge on top of it, and then fire a Nerf bolt at it from the Nerf crossbow, and it will go off, and it will even recycle the Nerf bolt, which is
super efficient.
Yeah,
I really like when I'm using the mimic power. The mimic power, you have to use it on something. Like you need whatever you want to turn yourself into. If you want to turn yourself into a mug, you need an actual mug there. You can't carry mugs in your inventory, but at first when I just unlocked it, I tried copying some stuff for fun, and then I actually came to a thing where I'm like, oh, there's a small hole here I can get through if I was a small thing, and looking around for a small thing, oh, there's no small things to copy, and then I realized, wait, I have an inventory just full of small stuff. I just dropped like a bundle of wire, and then looked down at the bundle of wire and turned myself into it, and then rolled through a
It's really consistent in that way, isn't it? It's really consistent about what is an object in the world. It has to be because of mimics and stuff, but I love that it gives you powers that let you actually kind of play with that.
Yeah, they obviously decided to go big on that, because the lifty arms power, you can upgrade it to level 3, and then you can just pick up like sofas and stuff, and nearly everything that isn't attached to the floor counts as an object that you can pick up.
And that is its strength, is that when you feel like you should be able to do something often you can. It's not going to be a dick about it. And I think, so I'm willing to forgive the problems that emerge from some of the janky stuff that happens when that's the case. Similarly, there are moments where I'm okay with having my freedom curtailed a bit if it means it moves the game along or shows me something. That's okay. I think the things that have stuck with me that, like, I think just hold it back from being a great game, I think it's a really good game, are, like, there's a laudable attempt to make these kinds of games a little bit more accessible to people by giving you quite a thorough journal. So if you don't want to bother with mission objectives and stuff, you don't have to. It's never going to make you do things in a specific way. But it gives you lots of different opportunities to find the information you need, both in game in terms of emails and stuff, but also out of the game in terms of the Quest UI and what Morgan writes in his or her journal about what's going on, which is a really good idea, because I think one of the weaknesses of these games is that they are very opaque to people who aren't into this kind of thing, and I would want someone to be able to play this as a relatively linear sci-fi adventure who doesn't give a shit about solving every encounter in the weirdest possible way. But then there are just some little things that make that inelegant. Like, something I encountered was, as it should, it lets you skip ahead in quests. So I didn't prioritize an optional objective you're given. So I'll give you the no specific nouns example. You're constantly being given optional objectives, which are like, chase down this lead in this section of the station. I chose not to do one of them. And then in a later section of the station, while pretending to be a roll of tape and sliding under doors and going and doing things I shouldn't, I found an item or a clue from later in that quest chain that I had ignored, which is great. And it just advances me to the current stage of the quest, which is what you'd want it to do.
Yeah,
right. That's great. However, it then filled in my journal as if I had been to a whole part of the station I'd never been to. So Morgan then writes in her journal, I went to here and it wasn't here, but I followed a trail of clues and found it here instead. And that's not true. I just found the thing at the place where it was. And that it feels sloppy, and it feels like it downplays the experience a little bit. I've also ended up encountering some crucial, like, enemies and things from later in the game from, like, possibly the angle they didn't expect me to encounter them from, which has robbed certain moments of what should be their import. Like, the thing Dark Souls does, where the first time you encounter a boss, it plays the boss's cutscene, and then the second time you encounter the boss, it never bothers.
Yeah.
If you load it again, or like, allows you to skip it. Prey almost feels like it needs little sort of boss introduction cutscenes for certain enemies, because if you do them the weird way, so much of the impact is lost. And then that's the stuff that just sort of eats away at it for me, like that kind of feeling of jankiness. I'll talk about it on the spoiler cast because I really don't want to spoil it, but I've had one side quest end with a cop-out re my actions so egregious. I kept replaying it because it's the funniest thing in the fucking world. How hard they cop out of having to give you any consequences for your different ways of possibly solving a problem at the end of a side quest. And it's stuff like that like, it feels like, as ever with these games, where they give you so much freedom, there's a finite extent to which the simulation can hold together. And almost the measure of how good these games are after they've achieved all that difficult baseline stuff is, at what point do you start going, oh, come on, that's not quite right. And for me, Prey sort of gets there maybe a little bit too soon. Like, I'm okay with it all falling apart in the final level. But it sort of feels like at the halfway point, you start to realize the extent to which they were able to really simulate how much you could interact with that station and the things on it.
I've had one side quest in particular that was just total bullshit. Just from start to finish, just every part of it was just, oh my god, I can't believe this is in here.
Yeah. I think and then there's little small things like someone's got to figure out it shouldn't be hard to do an intelligent play last audio recording system. So when you pick up an audio log, it gives you the option to press L to play that log. Except at some point in the game, that just stopped working properly for me. It now just plays the last log it thinks I picked up, which may or may not be the one I just picked up. And there are literally time-sensitive challenges later in the game where all the context you need for the decision you're being given a timer on making in audio logs. And during one really crucial one, a life or death decision that I'm giving, admittedly 5 minutes to make, but it still feels like you're on the clock. I pressed L to listen to the series of audio logs I just picked up, only to get one about D&D. I mean, they play D&D in space, so that's cute. But like, it was genuinely one of those, oh, come on moments, to quote you. Like,
That's my phrase now.
there was a sort of, a little frustration at the edge of what the game was doing.
Yeah, I had a really bad one with that where it's still screwing me really, where I entered an area. It was actually the one I was talking about where you enter and there's already enemies right in your face and there's not much you can do to plan your approach. And so, of course, the tactical thing to do is to like go back through the level loading transition, which is, totally artificial. They can't follow you through that. But the first time I did it, it was just, as the fight started, it was involved 2 robots and the robots talk a lot. Like I say, a robot talking volume is twice the important dialogue volume. Important dialogue, came during the fight. Like it waited when there was silence, there was no, like, important communication. And then when I actually got into combat, that's when it started to tell me the important thing. And I didn't hear it. I finished the fight. And, at the end of it, you don't get that back. It doesn't go into your log anywhere that I can find. There's no way to like recap it. If you get an audio diary, you can listen to that anytime, but this wasn't an audio diary. And then a while later I was just looking through my quest log of like the latest step of the quest I was on. I looked back at the last step and just in the text there's like a huge plot development, like massive major stuff. And I don't know if that was what they were telling me about. Like, I have no idea what they said during that whole thing. And, I looked through my save games and I didn't save I didn't make a permanent save for 7 hours before that point. So I don't have any way of getting back there. I just gotta replay the game basically.
That's good advice.
What I'll actually do is
all the way through.
I will watch, it would be good. Like every time there's a level transition, make a permanent save maybe. Yeah. That's what I wish I'd done. But what I'll do is watch someone's Let's Play and try and hear it from that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, the thing I've been trying to figure out is whether or not these little quibbles detract from it, because you can almost scroll up in that chat we had and then like the initial impressions are like, oh man, this is amazing. Like, this is so good. And I didn't even think it is. And I'm still super impressed that even though it's 2 different Arcanes, but that technically one studio is capable of getting Thief Deus Ex right and then getting System Shock right.
Yeah,
like,
it's incredible.
Surely like, I think it's a substantially better game than either BioShock, really, as a game. Because like, those are solid, but they're not very sort of systemically ambitious. They're much more narrative experiences. They're good, but like, they're more about clever level design and kind of experiences that you only have once. You tend to have them in the same way as other players, more or less, than they are about kind of the mad creativity that you can exercise in Prey.
I would say that I enjoyed shooting the things in BioShock, and let's not underestimate how, just basic combat
that's true.
Is important. And that's the thing that really lets me down for Prey. Like, I just find almost every combat encounter quite irritating for some reason, even if there is a plan, even if I execute and use my powers in some way, there's something that's gone wrong or being irritating about it. And just almost from the feel of the weapons, the way the enemies move. That's, with BioShock, there was genuine, a lot of people say it's a bad shooter, but I got pleasure out of going through those combat encounters.
Yeah, I think that's true, particularly for BioShock 2.
Definitely.
I think Prey's strength lies in the way you solve other problems. Like, Prey can make opening a door feel like a triumph if you do it in a silly way.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas most of the games, it's like key card, hack the thing.
Yeah.
Find the vent, and that's it.
I think if it was a corridor game, it would be like a 3 out of 10. But that's how much the level design and the systemic kind of playfulness of the powers actually gives to it. I think the fundamentals are actually quite weak in a lot of ways.
The other thing about it is, I think the thing, so if, thing one that's become remarkable about Arcane is they can make both games. They can make the System Shock game and the Deus Ex Thief game to a substantial degree of success. The other thing is that, like, at this point, surely you just have to give them the holy shit, your art direction is incredible kind of a prize forever, because like, it has the same quality. I mean, it's funny when you find any portraits of characters, it's set in the same face universe as Dishonored.
Yeah.
Like, nothing else about its art style is like Dishonored, except how faces look.
It's definitely true.
They're kind of sculpted, sort of impressionistic, kind of gaunt faces on everybody. But the thing that strikes me about it, we talked about the interfaces and stuff last week, but like, that despite similarities to BioShock in that, this Rapture and Talos 1 both have some like Art Deco influences. It feels far more like a conscious art choice within the game. Obviously, like Rapture within the context of BioShock is a theme park made by one man as a bad idea. But as a game, it also feels like a kind of mad showcase for an almost out of game idea. You know what I mean? It's sort of, whereas like, the fictional setup for Prey, the things that are different about its timeline that allows, this is not a spoiler, this is, game beginning stuff that allows humanity to have a translunar space station with 70s decor. It's that thing that they did with Dishonored, which I really, really respect, is it feels like all of the, not just the technological decisions, but the creative decisions about how those places look were made by people inside the game logically based on what they were making. It's the whole thing about, the reason the city blocks in the Dust District in Karnaca in Dishonored are diamond shaped, where most city blocks in Dishonored 2 are square, is because they break the wind in a specific way and they're angled into the wind. Yeah. And you would never notice that, but it's just the art team for that game looking at a map of that environment and going, which way would you build these buildings if there's wind coming from a particular direction? And Prey has that as well. And there's something about that I just love, like the way each of those, there's just stuff about each environment that's such a great idea. And like the way that the looking glass terminals are implemented, which is
they're awesome.
That is the most on the nose reference. They managed to get the Deus Ex code in there, but that is the most on the nose reference. But the way they're implemented throughout the game, in logical kind of interesting ways that change the way you think about environments is just, that's great. Like, I think that is what, like, I think if it looked like generic sci-fi cyberpunk stuff like most of these games used to, like, I would be the person, maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but I don't think either System Shock game or Deus Ex are good looking games. I think they are very of their time and they haven't aged well because, it was enough to do pretty by the book sci-fi or by the book cyberpunk in the 90s, and it's now not. And I think you now have to have something else. And they've gotten really good at giving those games a sort of an extra factor that makes them look unlike, you know what I mean? You've explored a space station in a game loads, but this feels like a really specific place.
Yeah, it's a mistake if you've kind of seen a lot of the marketing materials for Prey to think it is like just BioShock again, because it isn't actually when you're actually in that world, because it's very much how a 70s corporate culture would present themselves in the lobby, but then you actually go into more utilitarian areas that are designed based on like sci-fi technology just beyond those areas. Like the way there are waiting rooms and offices that, you'd expect maybe civilians or visitors to go into that are designed to look in a certain way as according to, like a Mad Men setting might, if it was, in the 70s.
Yeah, Mad Men's actually a pretty good touchstone for a lot of its offices.
Exactly.
Ochre wood panelled offices
with like green lamps, those that, low green lamps. I don't think they precisely have those in Prey, but that kind of thing, but then it very quickly, when you kind of go back into, behind the scenes of the fun parks, all the places are actually making the things and doing the science. They actually feel like science spaces that would exist. They're quite, more sterile.
Yeah. And they're not miles off real, sort of space station designs or relatively believable sort of airlocks, and all the industrial parts of the station feel more like modern day things. Like the shuttles are space shuttles. That's, that's the thing.
It's very similitude again. That's it. That's the word.
Yeah.
It's like the place has its own internal logic that it adheres to.
And also a big garden in space.
Yeah, looking forward to getting there.
Yeah. That's Prey, pretty much. We should do a spoiler cast because I want to talk about some specific things about where it goes and how it pans out, how it tells the story.
I'm intrigued now. It's good. I wasn't really seeing that they would have the potential to deliver that sort of twist.
Read as much as you can. Read all the emails. Read all the things. Pay attention to the details.
I've been doing the thing where, weirdly, the only loot glint in the game is resources and books. All the books glow on default settings. So, bookshelves full of shimmering tomes. And I've done the thing where you just sort of click on them, not read it, but then kind of press escape in the hope that it would bank it in my kind of codex.
I think it does, doesn't it?
I hope so.
It does for emails. I don't think it does for the books.
No.
Although the books are less important than the emails on the whole. The books are more like, some of the books are pretty important, but like...
I think it's note something, if you use a note, you actually take it. So it's kind of, it's in your inventory at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, it tends to be, the books also reoccur. Right. So like people have the same books in different offices.
I kind of wish that if you'd read it before, it wouldn't have loot glint. Because that's, like, I can't really remember what I've read before, and so I keep
Yeah, just keep an eye on the titles.
Yeah.
A lot of them are sort of just flavor as well. Like there's a lot of different people reading the same trashy sci-fi novel series, and you find multiple entries in it.
That is tracked in your stats, interestingly. There's a thing like, how many chapters of that have you found?
Huh. I think I've had a lot of them now. I've heard the entire journey of Trevor Starbender or whatever his name is. But yeah, I'm still really impressed with it. Like, for all those niggles, I think it's like,
I'm enjoying it so far.
I'd be surprised if it wasn't on a whole load of Game of the Year lists at the end of the year, one way or another.
I might spend my 28 neuro mods on some slow-mo shit and upgrading the shotgun.
28.
Yeah, I had that many.
I must have spent about 200. I've got like 28 left.
Wow, I've been struggling to find those things. Well, I'm in the first portion of the
So I can literally make them now.
Yeah.
okay.
Has it taken that away?
I've heard there's a limit, but I haven't hit it.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's not spoiled. It just makes you put some restrictions on your ability to just power yourself up completely forever. But yeah. Cool.
I also didn't get, there's a couple of skills you can get at the start that will make that more efficient as well. And I saw them at the start and I thought, well, if I'm going to get those, I should get them now. But on the other hand, I actually I don't really like things where it's like, spend this skill point to get more skill points, or spend
it's a resource management. Do you want that, or do you want the ability to hack things, or, super jump? Or
it's like, it does pay off in the long run, but I just thought, I want natural stuff.
I think that is a legit complaint, actually, is that, while it has a set of standout powers that are really good, too much of its skill trees are given over to passive benefits that you ultimately probably won't care a lot about, because they sort of open up interesting possibilities, but not a lot. Or onto powers that you kind of want, but probably will forget to pick from the wheel, because there is a lot of powers in that game.
Yeah, the wheel actually turns into a spiral when you have too much. Like, when it doesn't fit in 360 degrees, you just keep going around on a spiral to access all your powers.
I mean, which is good, because, it pauses time when you're going down the ability spiral to find the specific thing you want. But it's that thing of, again, Dishonored has that thing of, like, every power feels very different, and they're all good, and they're all meaningful.
Yeah.
Whereas Prey does some things with, like, it'll do, like, the same power, but one of them will affect machines and one of them will affect organic targets. Right. That's not a huge spoiler, but it's like, could that have been the same power just to save on time? And, this is sort of...
And I've got two that just deal damage, basically. And the reason I've got both is partly they have slightly different effects, might be better against certain enemies, but also because there's a cooldown on each one. So if you have two, you can alternate, and then...
there's there are sort of interesting things to talk about in spoiler casts about things you can do with those powers that you can't do in other contexts. But yeah, there's that kind of... It's really tempting to just rave about how good the mimic power is, and how, some of the other ones, and gloss over the fact that you may also be drawn into spending 3 skill points on fire resistance. But that stuff is in the game, probably doesn't need to be, really.
It does suffer from having to pay to avoid irritation. So especially in, like, inventory expansion.
Yeah.
Where it's just give me the fucking inventory space.
The wrench stamina thing, like swinging the wrench drain stamina, and then there's an upgrade you can get to make the stamina more and to reduce this wrench stamina
if you're paying,
cost.
This is like a really good rule. If you're paying skill points to make a game less irritating, then that is just a shitty way to invite a player to spend points. Why not just give you the wrench capacity to, hit people with a wrench,
I think they wanted a lot of point sinks because they knew they were going to let you find a hell of a lot of fucking points.
But that invites you to misspend. That's the trouble. Like, it invites you to spend not on the exciting things, but upon, it's really irritating not being able to carry...
Puts pressure on you to...
5 plants. I'd want to carry 10 plants, so you pay for it. And then that takes away from vital skills, like apparently like time slow-mo and stuff.
It feels it's far more of an RPG, in the way that System Shock was as well. Like, it is a lot closer to that route.
Neither Bioshock nor Dishonored had
the trouble is, it's because you don't know how scarce neuromods, the kind of, those neuro points are going to be. Is that you're completely in the dark about what you should and shouldn't spend, and like you're going to make bad decisions based on that because you're going to be too scared of spending on things that quality of life spending. So I felt really bad about spending 2 points on inventory expansion. 2 points is nothing in that game, really. But there's no way for you to tell that if you're in the first few hours of the game.
Yeah.
So a lot of that stuff just feels sloppy to me and bad. But again, these are niggles. Like overall, it's pretty great.
Yeah, it's easy to let those small things mount up. It's the old trade-off. Like, you make a game with this much freedom and you end up with sort of frustrating people with the fact they've got too much freedom and they're able to make decisions that they didn't like or that kind of thing. I think the one thing I would change is I don't think it would suffer at all for having a relatively accessible total respec option for respending all of your points.
Yeah.
Even with the amount of points it gives you, because like
There would be interesting plot implications of that.
Yeah. Yes, there would. So
they'd have to fudge their way around.
So there are plot reasons why that wouldn't work, but also, so the downside so there seems to be there's two ways of designing a game this way. You either have the game where you can respec at any time, and in the course of the playthrough, you can experience lots of different playstyles in the course of a single run. That's actually what Mass Effect Andromeda did, I think, quite successfully. Because it means by the time you finish the game, it makes a plot point of it, by the time you finish the game, you probably don't need to play it again just to see a different class, because you've tried all the different things, and that's cool. Or you make the players' skill decisions and equipment decisions permanent and encourage them to play again. That is what Prey is doing. There are things it does that make it's obvious it wants you to play it twice, I think. But I don't know how gratifying that actually is, and there's definitely been times where like I found secrets that I've really wanted to uncover, and for that reason I've got maximum hacking and maximum repair. But I don't always need them, and there feels like I kind of want to have, like, once I've unlocked it once, let me kind of switch it off to get a different power for a bit, and then go back to having maximum hacking when I need it. I know it's kind of a cop-out, but I may only play this game once, so let me see all the things.
I'd say only expect any player to play it once, and if anyone finishes your game, you're lucky, to be honest, given the stats that,
that's true,
seen for, completion rates. Like, don't design a thing around people playing it more than once, especially if it's 20 or 30 hours long. It's just not going to happen.
There are 3 different achievements for completing the game without taking a certain set of powers. Like, do it once without taking this set, and now do it once without taking that set, now do it once without taking either set.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Not going to do that.
Which feels,
it's not going to happen. Life's
not
too short.
about that.
I mean, admittedly, Dishonored does the same thing, because Dishonored has Ghost and no magic and that kind of thing, but...
Yeah, I'm not actually complaining about those achievements, but it suggests to me that they expect you to do that. That they're sort of thinking that you to replay a lot. It's so fucking long. I played it for like 25 hours and I haven't finished it.
Yeah, it is. That's the other thing. It's a real long game. So, yeah, those sort of small decisions you make early.
I actually wonder, I mean, I'm not finding it's like full of filler or anything, but I wonder if it ended 10 hours sooner, whether I would be coming away just glowing. Because, 10 hours in, I was absolutely in love with it, and I think it could have done better if it was shorter. I don't know if I actually wanted to be shorter, but it's interesting.
Yeah, now you do.
It's that thing where if you make a really good game and then you add a bad section onto it, I'm not saying we've done this, but in general, I have a friend who, I won't say who, because this probably isn't meant for public consumption, but he had a game where it got really good reviews, and then towards the end of development, he added an extra mode to it, and that extra mode was people didn't like it, and almost all the reviews are kind of like, oh, it's brilliant except for this mode, which doesn't very good, and then give it like a not great score. And he's like, if I just cut that off, it would have got better scores, and yet I didn't. It's just entirely extra. You don't need to play it at all. It's just a totally optional extra thing. And it's interesting how that works, because same price. You didn't charge extra for this mode or anything. You still pay that money and you get all of that game that would have got a better score by itself. But just by adding this extra thing, you could bring it down. Don't know whether that's a problem with criticism or a problem with games or players or money.
Maybe the entire thing is a write-off.
Abandon this earth.
Indeed.
Should we do questions from questions?
Yes. But what's that in the corner of the room again?
Oh no.
It's Pip.
Discovered.
I know, I wasn't really hiding very hard, was I?
She was a mimic all along.
Yeah. That's what that cup that looked exactly like Pip was.
But I
She
put
is
a post-it
holding a mug.
on.
Not
You
a
weren't
Pip.
supposed to know.
So putting a post-it on something that says not a mimic, I don't think prevents it from actually being a mimic. But what you could do is put a post-it on everything with a unique number on it. So you just number all your possessions, because mimics have to copy something exactly. So if you see 2 numbers that are the same, one of them's a mimic.
That's useful advice if we ever get into this situation.
There would be quite a lot of numbers at some point. You'd probably have to come up with a system.
I think just as you go around your room or whatever, just do it in ascending order.
Interesting. What if it hides itself as a post-it note?
Well, it has to copy something exactly. So whatever the post-it note says, it would be, and it also something nearby. So you'd see the one it's copying next to it.
So it has to be in the ambient area.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but could it be a post-it note on top of another post-it notes? Because they stack really well. That's what post-it note blocks are for.
Yeah, so if it copies just the post-it note, it would have to then like attach itself to the other post-it note, which I don't know if they can do that.
I think maybe we're drilling too deep into this.
I haven't played Prey.
No.
I was playing Astroneer, but then I got lost. So I drove off into the desert and then couldn't find my way home.
You were towing a big tomato at the time, were
Yes,
you not?
I was.
Is that out yet, or is it still early access?
Oh no, it's still pre-alpha, I think, technically. So
I'm so bored of waiting for early access games to come out.
yeah, but at the moment, like,
Stop being already good.
they've just done a thing which means that you can. I was ignoring it because I thought I don't want to burn out on it, but then they added the ability to blow up hydrazine fuel with dynamite, and so pretty much all of this evening has been spent finding dynamite and harvesting hydrazine so that I could build myself a crater that I would make even bigger just with a ridiculous explosion. So that's that. Oh, also I made some biscuits, but the cookie dough was kind of old and I ate about 5 biscuits before I just gave up and thought this was bad.
Okay, is this
Astroneer
in
or
real
real
life?
life?
Oh no, that was in real life.
Okay.
Can you, in Astroneer,
So
can you
don't
make...
eat the biscuits downstairs. And I'm not just saying that because I want them all. They're grim.
In Astroneer, can you make water from hydrazine and
No,
oxygen?
there's no water requirement, certainly at the moment. Like, and to be honest, in the time since I last played it, it looks like they've removed the organic matter because you used to be able to...
Organic matter?
Well,
I was using that.
it used to be that if you hoovered the grassy bits of it, it would accumulate in your backpack like any other resource, but I haven't had any so far, but I don't know whether that's because I haven't researched any like biomatter generators or anything, and so it's just not recognising it as a resource yet, or whether they removed it because it was a bit dull and a bit limited.
I just really like the bit in The Martian where he makes water because, as he says, he knows the recipe. And I'd like to do that in a game.
Nice. Sorry, yes, so I'm here. Hello.
So our, when I do, for some reason, when I tweet for questions every week, I tend to do it in a different way. I don't know why. It's because everything we do on this podcast is the product of doing something weird once 3 years ago and then still doing it in that weird way now, just because.
You could do it in an efficient business-like capacity next time.
Yeah, just once.
That would be different.
Yeah. And for some reason today I did the tweet in the style of the Muppets opening song, which, you know, normally I wouldn't mention this, except that our first question tonight was sent to us in the form of a video from a Muppet.
It was a good one as well.
Which is amazing. However, being sent a video is actually the worst way to receive a podcast question. So what we'll hopefully do is pull the audio from the video and insert it into the podcast right now.
Dear Crete and Canberra, for some reason your question call got me thinking about live theater that defies suspension of disbelief. Now, we talk a lot about ludonarrative dissonance in games, and the ones that we tend to accuse most of ludonarrative dissonance are the big-budget AAA, high-def, realistic graphics shooters that break the fourth wall and tell us we're bad people for shooting all these people that the game designers put in for us to shoot. Now, my question is, if you want to maintain a Brechtian disconnect in a game and make some sort of commentary or political statement, is it possible to do it in an immersive, high-def, quote-unquote realistic looking way without coming off as cheesy or sort of condescending? Thanks. Outward Friendly.
And we'll just pretend we just heard it and try to remember what it said.
Yeah, indeed. So that was sent to us by Oddwood Frenry, and we'll put a link to the tweet itself where you can see it read to you by a Muppet that does drink on the words Ludonarrative dissonance, so that you can watch it on a device that has a screen, unlike the way most podcasts are received. To the question, which is about Ludonarrative dissonance, unfortunately, and now I've said it. Not everyone needs to follow him in that. Not everything we do needs to be a weird tradition.
We watched this question twice before the pod, and it mentions Ludonarrative dissonance twice, so I've already drunk 4 times.
Yep, that's it.
You just said it twice.
Fuck.
Is about how the games that suffer the most for this are the ones that often also have the most realistic production values, and therefore put you in, presumably are the ones that actually come off the worst when they decide to try and kind of be didactic. I think that's probably what he's getting at when he talks about, when he references Brecht in this context. He's talking about games having a kind of didactic message that, you know, transcends the realism of the world the characters are occupying to kind of talk directly to the audience. And the games that do start to kind of like hammer a message after allowing you to kind of invest in the verisimilitude, to use a word that's come up a few times in this pod, of the setting, are the ones that come off worse. And I think I agree with that generally. It feels like, you know, which is not to say that games are perfectly realistic, but if a game encourages you to give the world the benefit of the doubt and kind of invest in it only to kind of, or, you know, invest in it to the extent that you invest in any game while applying game logic to it, only to then go like, to try and turn that against you to make a point, I have never found that particularly successful.
It's because games have to consistently break that rule to teach you how to play the game. So it's the classic thing in Call of Duty is, not that Call of Duty's ever aspired to deliver any sort of message of that sort, but still, the press E to give respect to a grave. You know, if once you've done that, or you know, press W to follow this soldier into fake war, like once you've already penetrated the fourth wall in that way, you're never going to get it back in order to deliver some sort of serious message.
Yeah. That's true. And actually, to be honest, the games that do break the fourth wall most effectively tend to not also aspire to like realistic production values.
No.
Yeah, like Stanley Parable.
Yeah.
Which actually is very well rendered, but obviously it's not trying to simulate anything that could ever happen. Like
Yes.
But at least it simulates mundane environments in a way that, you know, a lot of games are so just obviously, you know, they've spent so much time and money into investing in a particular genre of fantasy, whether it be a war movie type setting or a fantasy type setting, that they're already just so unrealistic that even breaking the fourth wall is meaningless, because they're already so obviously constructs that, you know, fictional constructs, that breaking the fourth wall is meaningless anyway, because they're already just so transparently fake. So, you know, the Call of Duty war movie is just an absurd parody of old war films that, you know, doesn't really work very well.
It does really bother me that in the new Hitman, you can find a computer that's playing the Hitman Sniper Challenge, and it's just like a fucking picture of you on the computer. Like, just the Hitman game exists in the Hitman universe. That really annoys me. So there's an argument to be made that I was invested enough in this world and believed in it enough that jars. I don't think they're doing it to make any kind of political point. No. I think they're trying to promote their Hitman Sniper Challenge game.
You could probably do some interesting things with that in VR, but I haven't seen it done. Just because it's a different type of space. And I think it would be meaningful if somebody stood a particular distance in front of you, gave the impression of actually offering eye contact and, you know, had some form of dialogue that was not immediately awful.
Yeah, there's some interesting, I mean, maybe this, I don't know how relevant this is, but there's some interesting challenges in VR for getting characters to look right. Like, obviously it's just really hard to get that level of fidelity at all, but also if you make them look at you the way they look at a game character, it doesn't feel real in VR. And apparently, like, they've done some experiments with, like, they need to look at your left eye, then your right eye. Like, it comes down to that level of precision.
Yeah. And also, like, they can't just assume where your head's going to be, because I'm a lot shorter than a bunch of people, and so if they were looking directly over my head, then that would absolutely ruin the fiction. But I do think that it's a very different medium and would have the capacity for that to be a meaningful shift in tone or in message or in anything, really.
Yeah, it's an interesting yeah, it's an interesting. It's an ongoing problem. I agree. I think I agree that I don't know if games will ever quite be able to have their cake and eat it in this regard, simply because I don't think, even with the best VR, I don't think you'll ever have something so believable that the person forgets that they're not dealing with a real
Yes, it isn't the idea
subject
of
matter.
Brechtian drama is that the fridge works on the stage, that kind of level of...
It's the opposite of Brecht.
Oh, right. So
Brecht is more willingly didactic, more willingly fourth wall breaking.
Gotcha.
Like it's anti-naturalistic.
Okay.
Which is, I think that's kind of the. I mean, like I can't think of many games that are like consciously Brechtian, really, because most games when they break the fourth wall to deliver a message do so by having a character in the fiction talk to you, the player. Like. This could turn into a much bigger thing, but like the conceit of the player in a game is a very different thing to the audience in a play, because the player is kind of in the world anyway. So if you're talking directly to the player, are you breaking the fourth wall? Like, it's a strange, you have characters talking to the character you ostensibly are, but really talking to you.
Yeah, press space to jump.
Yeah, and that's
not you, soldier, the guy controlling you.
It's a strange thing. Like it's an imperfect analogy for the way games tell stories. But I think maybe that's one of the reasons it always lands in a dodgy way. That
also, like, people in other media don't do it well either. It's not like film isn't replete with people who bungle it, or TV or
in what sense?
Well, I mean, as in if we're just talking about people who break the fourth wall to deliver a message or something, it's I can't think of many examples really where anything has been done well. Like I can't think of
House of Cards or something implements that.
I don't watch it.
Right, but nonetheless, it has that sort of talking directly to the audience device in a way that's. Sort of
but that's
theatrical.
what I'm saying is I don't have the examples to hand, but like I've seen it being done but badly, if you see what I mean. Like
even the House of Cards things is like Iago basically, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a Shakespearean aside rather than
sure.
like
the
a
actual kind of.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Is like because House of Cards is definitely in a literal sense breaking the fourth wall because he looks at the camera, so that is the fourth wall is clearly not there. But he doesn't reference that this is a TV show or anything like that. It's basically narration, but he happens to be.
It's an aside. Like, I mean, in a strictly like, in a pure theatrical sense, it is exactly how asides function in Shakespeare.
And does it count as breaking the fourth wall?
Well, I mean, I think technically, yes, it does. It's just.
And is it Brechtian?
I don't, I would say that was more Shakespearean or more classic, or not even Shakespearean, like classical tragedy includes that as well. Like having a character express their interiority by turning to the audience and say, I'm feeling this is an ancient dramatic device. It's just out of favor because we tend to value naturalism. So we like the idea that a character doesn't have to say how they feel. They'll express it through actions or expressions. But go back any distance and it's fairly common. Games don't really tend to do that.
Point-and-click adventure games do it a bunch, right?
That's true.
Loads of times when, Guybrush Threepwood just turns to you and talks to you like a player sometimes.
It's kind of interesting because, like, point-and-click adventure games are about sets. And it's a very dramatic kind of like stage construction.
It is like a stage,
the scenes. Then they're allowed to turn at you because you, as the player, are literally an audience looking onto this perspective.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm trying to think, this is a half-formed thought. I wonder where, like, Bastion fits into this with a narrator he's narrating what's going on, but in a way that the character can't hear, and it's talking to you, really.
Mm. Yeah.
Well, I need to go see some Brecht.
Yeah.
Learn that whole
Go
deal.
see Threepenny Opera. It's good.
Cool.
It's an out of favor way of telling a story, I think, or getting across a political message, but it's interesting. Like, I think probably the closest games get to this sort of thing is like BioShock. I mean, BioShock's politics are the opposite of anything you would find in a Brecht play necessarily, but having, I think BioShock is basically like inches from being a musical at the best of times anyway, to be honest. Because it does use music and performance, like the whole Sander Cohen thing, right? Like, you could have a whole section of that game which was just like The Fountainhead, the musical. It just uses horror and shooting instead, basically. It has gunfights where it could have dance numbers.
And that's a game that strongly comments on your behavior as a player, but does it in the language of talking about you as a character.
Yeah.
Like it criticizes you as a character for obeying everything you were told, and the game itself tells you there was a reason for that. And and the subtext is extremely clear that it's asking you to question yourself as a player and saying, look at the way you play games, and you just follow what you're told, and that you're basically insulting your role, which is funny because obviously the game is guilty of all the things that it's criticizing. It did force you to do this stuff. There was nothing else to do.
Yeah. And also, it's, I think that's probably the reason it doesn't hold together is like the boundaries of a stage performance, particularly in the context that's being raised in this question. It's amazing we're having this discussion about a question asked by a Muppet. The boundaries of a stage performance are very clear, so addressing the audience is a very clear device. You know exactly why they're doing it, the context in which it's happening, and it's not something that would happen by accident. Whereas games are much worse at defining exactly what is and isn't in the game, and what information is and isn't accepted as part of the game or not by the characters in it, if that makes sense. So when something like Bioshock, even though it was sort of mind-blowing at the time, when something like Bioshock turns around and says, like, gotcha, you were playing this like a video game all along, you're right to turn to it and go, fuck you.
The alternative was to stand still and do literally nothing, which isn't the choice, is it?
Exactly. And this, indeed, that phenomena of having, a dissonance between the Ludo and the narrative is where this magical journey began. But no, thank you for sending in that question in such an amazing way.
Yeah.
I would stress that I think we're maybe at capacity for weird high concept traditions that are increasingly impenetrable to new listeners at this point. So please, we can make this all one glittering moment of having a question sent in by a Muppet. I feel like if this becomes a thing, we might be in some trouble, given that what we produce is a podcast. But nonetheless, a good Muppet. Eddie writes, hey, Crabs and Crawdads. I work for a web agency where there are 10 of us. We're looking for an end-of-the-day game to play, to use the last 10-15 minutes of the day and maybe more on a Friday. We used to play a terrible shooter called Urban Terror and played one of the terrible old COD games, but have since failed to find anything we all agree on. We have a mixture of iMacs and Ubuntu machines to throw a further spanner in the works, and nothing is particularly suited for games. We're looking for something that is multiplayer, quick to launch and set up, doesn't take long to play, is reasonably level playing field. Any ideas would be greatly received. Eddie. This is a tricky one, because that's a crazy number of technical confines.
Yeah, I haven't checked if it's on Mac and Linux, but if it is, Rocket League sounds like a good fit for.
Luckily a lot of games on Steam list easily whether they're available on Mac and Linux. If they are, I would stick Towerfall in this category, the 2D archery game.
Yeah, I think Towerfall is, because I think it's been in a Humble Bundle, hasn't it? And those insist on you being on Mac and Linux.
Right. Because the other thing is that, the other solution to this is to have games that a bunch of people can gather around one machine and play with control pads, which means it only has to work on one of those types of things.
That's true.
Which I think is probably a better idea than like a LAN game, really, because like a mass cross-compatible LAN FPS or something for all of those different things, I really can't think of anything.
Did he say how many people?
He said 10.
10, holy shit.
I think you might have to have like
two separate machines.
2 or 3 separate machines playing a game, because that is tricky. Might be some strategy games.
Actually,
maybe.
Can't you like play Quake in your browser now?
Can you?
Isn't Quake Live that?
Quake Live does that? Yeah.
So
I'm not sure you can create lobbies, but if you could, then that'd be perfect.
Yeah.
Tricky one.
You could swap in and out and play something like Nidhogg as well.
Yeah, that's true.
And also just board games, like party games, or just a selection of smaller things that people can cycle in and out of.
Codenames is a good one that has no upper limit on how many players you can have.
Yeah, because you're on teams. Codenames Pictures is good.
Haven't played that one.
Codenames Code Words. I always confuse the two. But yeah, like anything that has teams essentially is good to have. I really like party games. I know that some people get a bit sniffy about them.
I get I imagine the only problem with board games in this context is he's talking about like the last 10-15 minutes of the work day.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if you've got small enough.
Yeah, that's true. Sure, it's just the setup time necessarily.
Yeah, there's actually, I wonder about like the Jackbox games. Those are pretty quick to get into, and they're just like a thing where you only need one screen and everyone can like connect to it on their phone or on their PC or whatever. It's just like a URL you go to join the game. And they are things like, everyone makes up a funny caption for this thing, and then you vote on who was the funniest, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. Like, I'm sure there are things out there. It's hard, that technical requirement does make it really hard to find the thing he seems to be asking for, though, which is like, maybe Quick Live is a solution, but like, Counter-Strike, but for all of these different devices that runs on anything. That's a unicorn. Not literally a unicorn, but...
Be a good recommendation if we could make it.
Indeed. A person on the internet writes, Dear Misters and Madams Speaker, the Honourable Graham Smith, former Beard Minister for Spelunky, once wrote that game names are almost universally terrible. I agree, and the public deserves better. Games would do well to follow in the footsteps of the Honourable Systems Minister for Suspicious Developments. It's our intention to do exactly that by renaming games after non-central features with the For Fuck's Sake Nomenclature Act. This is hard to say, by the way. What games would you rename as part of this initiative, and how? We've already had great success with popular Wizard 'em Up Creep Denial, along with Bethesda's new release Intraocular Injections and its arcane stablemate Heart Reading. But we seek your podlordly wisdom in expanding the catalogue. Thank you for your time and for your excellent work in the House of Podlords casting the pods of commons. Game names are hard. We discussed this at the start of the podcast.
So it's actually not looking for games like names that would be like the real core of what the game's about. It's actually about named after like systems that didn't end up being super relevant or like central to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's where this has ended up because, like, yeah. So non-central, yeah, because Gunpoint is barely named after pointing guns.
Skyrim Plant Eater.
Yeah.
Just eat every fucking ingredient to find out what it does.
To be fair, BioShock Infinite becomes like bin cuisine.
Bin cuisine.
Bin guzzler.
Exactly.
Cordon bin.
Bin guzzler Infinite. Ooh, that's good. Let me think.
Prey would be wrench twatter.
I think.
I think he covered Prey in his letter.
Yeah,
right?
because intraocular injections are actually not that big a recurring feature.
That's true.
Although, so the first time you use a neuromod in Prey, you get the whole animation of stabbing yourself in the eye. Presumably, it's implied that that's happening every time you install a neuromod.
glad
So
it didn't
these
repeat
28
that.
I've got stocked up. I got to do that 28 times. No wonder his eye is sore in the intro.
Yeah. Trying to think. I mean, there's going to be a lot of like shooters, RPGs, any game with an inventory, which are like Rocket Hoarder or like Don't Throw Grenade.
Splunky or whip those bat fuckers poorly. Which is my experience of the game.
That is a central feature of the game, though.
It is.
Yeah, we're aiming for.
It's always. How many times you play that game? I can't get the bats. Just can't get them.
Knock yourself out with a rock.
Yeah.
Like with Splunky.
You have, I suppose I was going to ask, like, what would you call Gunpoint and Heat Signature with this in mind, but it's Gunpoint and Heat Signature.
Already did it. Already named them after relevant features.
Is Heat Signatures not a major factor in Heat Signatures?
No, it's in there, but it's, the mechanic of ships having heat sensors is now relegated to only the highest level ships, and, it's not like a major central mechanic. But the way we like present enemies when you're zoomed out to highlight them is with a heat signature. So there's a few like thematic ways that it's in there, but it's not a huge mechanic.
Sounds cool though.
It's interesting. Like, obviously you've ended up with this because each game has started with a central idea, pointing guns at people because each bullet is lethal and sneaking out of ships by, managing your heat signature. That you've then drifted away from. Do you think it's still useful to have that central point to build the game out from?
I think it's useful to not change the name of your game. I think that's the main thing. Like, Heat Signature was always going to be about boarding ships. That part was in the original plan, but I didn't have a good... The other thing I thought about calling it was, I think, Boarding Action, and now there's another game called Boarding Action, also in development, about the same thing. And so I'm glad I didn't pick that. But also, I think I prefer the words that sound good versus the thing that, unless there's a title that can literally really perfectly describe it. And Boarding Action, to me, that sounds like a naval clash, and you're going to have a whole bunch of like a
Cutlasses.
whole load of people boarding a ship. And, this is about infiltration and stealth, and Heat Signature just sounds nice. And yeah, you basically got to start somewhere, and I think it would be a mistake to either A, have no title, or B, have a title then change it, because it's just so hard to get recognition for anything, like to have people remember what the hell it is. And
do you know why, this is a genuine question, why Enemy Starfighter changed its name?
No.
Because Enemy Starfighter was the perfect name for that game. It became House of the Dying Sun.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's a game about starfighters and you are the enemy. But Enemy Starfighter is also a really evocative series of sounds, if you're me.
There's probably another game with Starfighter in the title, and they
is,
might have kicked up a fuss.
Maybe, but still, like, I don't know. It felt one of those instances where the new name just doesn't kind of do it for me at all.
Yeah.
I like House of the Dying Sun once you sort of get it. Like, it sounds just a romantic kind of, almost like, maybe sounds a bit like a samurai game or something.
Yeah,
but then you sort of realize, but in space, like, stars die and things.
But I read that title, I think, I'd love a samurai game, and then I click on it. And as much as I love space games, I can see
I
how
think
people
it's
get
right. And I think it's, I mean, it just makes me think of the Animals song. Just a thought, like, whether there was a specific reason it got changed, because I know that sometimes companies are aggressive with their trademarks and things.
Yeah.
I would call that game Cool Clouds, because the clouds are cool in VR.
Cool
in VR would be in brackets.
Would it be in, like, not maybe brackets, but like sort of like stamped over the top?
Yeah.
Tom Francis's Cool Clouds in VR. Or a rainbow explosion. That'd be good. Jamie writes, a walloping howdy. In a recent college class, we were given the task of programming Lego robots. One team managed to set up their robot so you could control it using WASD. A friend of mine in his late 20s, who I'd discussed games with before, and was an avid Final Fantasy fan, couldn't understand why the keys WASD were chosen. It dawned on me that he'd never played a game on PC before. This realization boggled my mind. Something that I'd taken for granted for so long suddenly seemed alien to him. Have you ever had such an event where something so ordinary and everyday to you seems strange to someone else? Thank you, Jamie. WASD. What's the deal with WASD?
To account for actually the early Final Fantasy ports on PC for 7 and maybe 8 required you to use the numpad in the most unnatural way possible, where you'd actually use the not the arrow keys in their like ordinary formation, but the numpad is in like the 2 button was back, right. And it was your hand doesn't work that way. You go and like
Sid Meier's Pirates does that as well.
Oh really?
Yeah, it's all based around the numpad, and you have to use all 9 keys. I think more than that. I think.
Do you remember a game called Die by the Sword?
Oh yeah.
That used the numpad keys to control the direction of your sword and the arrow keys to determine how you moved.
Nightmare.
You also kind of had to use the mouse as well, if I remember right.
Oh god.
It was a game for a 3-handed man.
You could use the mouse to swing the sword. I remember that, because that was what I liked about it. It was like having that, in theory, level of precision. In practice, not so much, because your arm was being inverse kinematic to like what you're trying to do, and it also has like gimbal restrictions and stuff.
I enjoyed that.
It's the first time anyone's ever laughed at the phrase gimbal restriction.
Gimbal restricted warrior.
I watched a video about gimbal lock recently, and why it was like, it's a thing in game development, and it's why Unity uses quaternions, and probably most 3D engines do, rather than three angles out of 360 degrees, which is like, you call that Euler angles. And quaternions have 4 variables, and when you learn 3D shit in Unity, you're like, why the fuck are there 4 numbers? What the hell do any of these mean? How does any of this work? How do I work with this? And it seems like a horrible pain in the ass. And then you look up gimbal lock, and you discover why you don't use 3 angles. And it's to do with like, the 3 angles are like 3 rings rotating within each other, and if any 2 get synced up at any point, now they can't be unsynced from each other, and there are certain rotations you can't do anymore. And it's a real problem in spaceships. Early, space missions, they had these 3 rings within each other, and to rotate their, like, it's like a camera around, they would have to rotate them through these angles, and it would have like an actual warning that like beeped when it got too close to gimbal lock. Like, these 2 rings are going to align, so you can't go left now. If you go left, these rings will line up and we can't get out of that situation. So you just can't go left. You have to go somewhere else.
Huh.
I don't know what a quaternion, like, physical apparatus would look like. I have never learnt really how they work or what they mean. All I know is it fixes that problem.
Tom's doing the face I'm thinking. That's maths.
There you have it.
But yeah, no, it's
I
interesting.
think that answers the question.
It's interesting what people internalize and don't. Like, you know, like, it feels so natural now, but now you think about it, and why is WAS where it is? I actually don't know.
All right, so what was the last game you played with cursor keys? Or what was the first game you played with WAS? I guess Quake, right, for everyone.
Probably, for me, it was probably the first Jedi Knight.
Might have been Unreal for me. That might have been West. Can't remember.
Isn't it just that that's where your hand's going to be if it's more naturally in front of you for a period of time? Because it's the furthest left on the pad.
Yeah, if you're right-handed, yeah.
I think it was when things switched to mouse look, right? So your right hand is going to be using the mouse and your left hand will be further across the keyboard. It's awkward to have them both on the right hand side. And it also, I don't know if this is
further forward because your hand on the mouse will be, so it's, for me it just feels like that would be a sensible place to put your other hand.
And it used to be like you had one hand on the cursor keys and the other hand was on that side of the keyboard, like control was often fire and space and stuff. And then if your left hand was on the cursor keys and your right hand was on the mouse, you don't have as many buttons to mess around with for like jump and stuff. Like there's nothing in easy reach of the cursor keys to use for jump. So I guess WSD makes it better because there's loads of keys around there. Although we 20 years later, we still haven't agreed on what those keys should be and where, what they should do.
I'm with their friend though. I mean, to me, it was this thing that everybody else had got really familiar with, and I was just like, why are we not using the arrow keys anymore? What the hell? When did this happen? Where was I? And it turned out that I was off having a console meeting, I guess, for 15 years.
Yeah.
So,
Do you know the WSD actually stands for West, Aft, South, and
Down.
Totally holds up.
Even though
Do you want
I
to go
think
south or do
three
you want to
of
go
those
down?
are down.
it also confuses me that people say WASD, and I know that it's because that's the order that they're in if you go from top to bottom and left to right, but I'm so used to people calling it WADs. Like, when did that change? What the hell, man?
Well, a WAD is something else in the context of a shooter.
Yeah, and Doom.
I don't know. I don't play
The WAD
shooters.
was a level, so like WADs would be levels.
Yeah, a WAD was a level, and you WASD on the WAD. You
You gotta WAS the WAD.
But like,
That's how it works.
but this is the thing, like, people did refer to it as WADs, right?
Not in my memory.
Seriously. Like, because I didn't make that up. Like, there's no reason why I would have made that up at all.
I like to spell it doors because that's the most word-like arrangement of those letters.
Apart
Sword.
from WADs, which is a word.
Or SWAD.
No, true. But I prefer the word doors.
Oh.
I don't think I've ever seen it referred to as WADs, purely because the WADs scene was something else.
I've not seen it referred to at all till I worked for PC Gamer, I don't think. And then, like, we use those keys, but we don't really, like, refer to it as a named thing.
Are there any alternatives to the classic WASD?
Yeah, there's one that's like one over, right? Like some people prefer that. I can't see the keyboard from here, but
Chris,
what would that be? EDF or something?
Because Chris, you're left-handed, and so do you just kind of shift your keyboard off rightwards and then use
Yeah,
WASD?
I'd rather rotate my keyboard, or I forget that there's a whole right-hand side to the keyboard, a forbidden place where we do not go. Or I cross my arms over if I'm being put at a desk, which is the wrong way around, and I can't fix it.
That's pretty elite. I can imagine. They're kind of complex.
I used to work, when I was a teenager, I used to work in like an internet cafe. We ran like Counter-Strike and stuff, and Warcraft and things. And if I was like jumped on a machine to play because it wasn't a real job really, but I haven't really had a real job by all accounts. So, if I had to like jump on a machine, I would cross my hands over to play Counter-Strike, which does make you look like the most elite person in the world.
It's a trick shot.
Exactly, like playing like this.
I've got this.
But that's by bit. In fact, I did that in the PC Gamer office once at lunchtime, and then editor Tim Edwards walked past and was like, "What are you doing?" And I was playing a Battlefield, like flying a plane upside down, like with my hands backwards. I've been here 2 weeks, Tim, and I'm the most elite games man in the world, and that didn't last.
It's the cat's cradle of shooter.
No, it's dumb. I don't like. It's much more convenient to use WASD, even if you're left-handed, because there's much more buttons around it.
Other countries have that. I mean, I'm assuming that. Because different keyboard
France,
formations, and I'm assuming they just call it by the keys.
Must be Zads. Zaz
like
in France,
or the is it the Dvorak keyboard? Like that would be.
Yeah. Does anyone use Dvorak?
Well, I mean, in other countries, right?
Do they? I know, like France uses Azerty. I thought Dvorak was like a thing someone came up with. Is like, this would be more efficient in theory to use this.
But I
then
thought
no one
it was
did
more common in particular place. Maybe I'm wrong on that front, but but also, I mean, in like, because aren't there particular kind of I forgot like pictogram keyboards as well that you can get for other languages? I might be wrong on that.
There are, yeah.
So it's kind of interesting because I mean, I guess pretty much it's standardized at some level, but like there might be other permutations or other kind of like regional variations.
If anyone wants to send in their interesting regional WASD variation, I'm genuinely interested in that.
Send us your regional WASD.
It's west, aft, south, and down on the way out, but it's east, stern, port. Anyway. Finally, we have a grudge, which I might just start reading before anyone suggests I be a goblin. Virserif writes, Dear Grudge Masters, I humbly submit a console-related grudge for you all. I work in a research group where we're working on a taxonomy of local co-op games. For the project, we just acquired a new Xbox One. And
it's in the book. Just Xbox One going in.
You had me at Xbox One.
You had me at Windows 10.
We had just acquired a new Xbox One. We were all excited to test it out. We had 1 hour free on Friday and we were all looking forward to it as a nice way to cap off the week. Our managers brought in a copy of Overcooked and we excitedly unboxed our new controllers. We were ready for a tedious startup process where all 4 of us had to individually sign in. We were ready for all of the systems and software updates, during which Microsoft had the gall to show us adverts for the console that we had just bought. But despite everything, we were not ready for the controller firmware updates. Each and every single controller out of the box had to be updated. With each tick of the loading bar, our hour of fun slipped further and further away. To make matters worse, there was no way to batch update them, and we had to wait for all 4 controllers to individually download and install the new firmware. And for some ungodly reason, if we so much as nudged the controllers, they would throw a tantrum and drop the connection, forcing us to start again. In the end, we only had 5 minutes to actually play the game we'd bought the console for. To this day, every time we boot up the Xbox One, we have to brace ourselves for the dreaded software loading bar. Thanks for begrudging, Virserif.
Yeah, that's Discord. In. I'm going to underline several things as well.
Yes. Continue.
Well, my controller doesn't work with Windows 10 now.
That's shit.
Steal yours.
Yeah.
So that's, it's
both
an
lost
Xbox
there.
360 controller, but it just doesn't work with Windows 10.
It's a third-party one, isn't it?
I was hoping to gloss over that so that it was less
but
my fault.
It should still work. I mean,
it should work, and it is a real annoyance that it doesn't. But to be honest, Windows 10 is the sort of software equivalent of having sand up your chuff anyway, so...
It's not as bad as Windows 8.
I don't have Windows 8. I have Windows 8. It's awful.
Yeah. You have it on your laptop.
Yeah, I don't use we don't speak.
This is the thing.
Got the whole laptop.
Windows 10 is bad, but it didn't make you forget your computer existed out of scorn.
No. And that's a whole different kettle of pain. But Windows 10, like, why? Why does it hide everything in so many stupid menus? And why do I have to keep signing into the wrong fucking gamer profile that is only the one that it reset me with that doesn't actually exist, but it was like, oh, you have to have games for Windows Live, you can't play Batman. And I was like, I don't even like Batman, but fine. So then I had to sort of get it to be like, okay, we'll reset it to this email address. But if you reset it to an email address, it was just like, oh, well, we've sent you some details. So it just created an account on the fly for an email address that I sent in that didn't actually have anything attached to it. So now I have an entire superfluous account. I still don't know what the previous one was, and I've got no fucking Chivos on this thing, and I'm now called Volatile Bridge 34. It's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Grudge is in the book. Don't care what it is.
So is that one as well.
They're all, I'm just gonna write Xbox and or Windows.
Double Grudge.
It's a good Grudge.
I like it.
Furious.
The console update thing sucks. Really, really sucks.
Though I was moaning about the fact that Steam couldn't recognise multiple controllers when I was playing Portal 2 a few podcasts back, which is still not resolved.
That's dumb as well.
Yes. Yep, PC is very bad at multiple controllers.
Ugh. Why is it all so terrible?
Well, quite.
If you know. Companies.
It's
yeah,
really big companies with conflicting objectives.
Yeah, I suppose so. But, like, did no one play it? Did no one boot it up on a normal person's machine and think, oh, that's not a great experience,
I just think that their objectives for a new release of Windows are just wildly out of whack with what anyone wants from it. Like, they don't want... their corporate objectives don't align with just, like, releasing a new thing that people want because it's good. And in fact, the fact that they didn't charge for Windows 10 for most people is an indicator of that. Like, they're not trying to make something that is good enough that you want to buy it. They're trying to force you into something or lure you into something so that then you're locked into it. And now they can sell you other stuff. And now other things that you used to be able to use don't work. And you have to get their thing.
Before you know it, you're gimbal locked. There's no way out.
Gimbal locked into Windows 10.
I had to do so much nonsense to just force it to not turn off my PC at odd intervals because it wouldn't let me say I am probably working if my PC is on. Please don't turn it off, you absolute dick. And it would just be like, okay, well, I'm assuming you've stopped working now, so I'm going to turn it off. And then all of this stuff about, like, oh, we're for the hardcore gamers. And I'm like, well, how about no, because I'm trying to play something. So, screw you. Just screw you. I'm so cross.
It's staggering.
I've got gin, but I mean, it's not going to fix this, is it? It's just not.
For a little while.
God, I hate Microsoft products so much of the time.
Yeah, they probably need some sort of competitor who would actually...
I was going to say, the only thing worse than Microsoft is anyone else. Like, they're all terrible.
Yeah.
It's good though, if you're in an enormous tech conglomerate, you just buy up any competition before you even really get started.
Great.
That's deleting the entire market. Creating a monopoly.
Speaking of which, for this reason, I think Valve stuff supports... all their games are on Mac and Linux, so any Valve game would work for our questioner about the games to play after work.
Ricochet.
Like, I was thinking TF2 maybe.
Oh yeah,
no, that's even better.
Game.
Slightly better than Ricochet.
That is a good point. Yeah, if your machines can handle it, that would work well. And on that note, I think we're done with grudges and done with questions and done entirely with Microsoft by the sound of things. If you have a grudge...
Imagine just going back to paper and pencils.
Now.
An actual calculator. Sorry.
And on that upbeat note, we leave you till next week.
Wow. So
look, my biscuits were bad, and I'm really upset about it, and I'm not in the mood. I've tried to paper.
Is Microsoft somehow to blame?
Disappointment. Probably. I mean, like, with all of their Windows 10 nonsense, did they install some sort of biscuit reminder so I would have remembered that the cookie dough would actually go off when it was in the fridge, rather than the fridge acting as some kind of preservative device that would actually keep it fresh for about a month? No, it didn't. And so here we are, sad biscuits. No one can have them. I tried. I failed. I'm very unhappy about this. They're in the bin.
Maybe your fridge didn't work because it wasn't a naturalistic plugged-in fridge. It was a Brechtian fridge. It's false.
But wouldn't it have been chatting to me?
It didn't.
Like, it would have made itself
There's
known.
a lesson here about dough.
Your biscuits are fucked.
Biscuits are fucked because I'm a Brechtian fridge. Good night.
That's the kind of smart fridge I want.
What, a sort of
Smart ass fridge.
like
Yeah, your biscuits are fucked.
the pro-Bolshevik
fridge.
singing people's fridge.
Oh.
We're the competition.
only
Microsoft needs.
the pro-Bolshevik singing people's fridge could have stopped this from happening. Clearly.
Is it going to make my toaster do terrible things as well?
Your bread's fucked. It's burned.
I mean, it might invite the toaster to seize the means of production. I don't know.
What's it going to do? Like, you run down the street with a bread knife?
That's how it starts. One toaster doing that leads to another toaster doing that.
They've
And
got
then
a
you have-
maximum radius, though. Unless
from the
you've got,
plug?
like, a wireless
That is the only
toaster.
thing stopping them from unionising. You're not wrong.
Yeah.
If they lined up correctly, they could maybe like fire a circuit board from one toaster into the slots of another toaster through some windows.
like
That's disturbing.
if they can.
Aren't you not supposed to put metal in the toaster?
Yeah, that's why that can't happen.
There you would know.
They'd be like, oh, I was going to do this, but actually this is dangerous.
Yeah.
The tyranny of the power cable is a lovely idea.
But they could, like, pass letters to each other that way, though, right?
There will, I mean, if we don't already have wireless internet toasters, that's happening shortly.
You can get
Toaster
a
row is
toaster
coming.
that will put a picture on it, on the toast of the thing. Like, it will char a picture
Hammer and sickle.
of, like, I don't know, Lenin's face or something, or like Marx's beard.
We don't want to avoid this becoming a cult of personality, Pip. It's not about that.
What, the toaster?
The movement.
It's about the ideals.
It's about the ideals. Like we don't have a single leader. That's contrary to the views of the
You tell
people.
that to the toaster. I'm not involved. This isn't my fault. I just wanted biscuits.
This is the problem, Pip. You wanted biscuits, but the reasons you can't have biscuits go deeper. They're systemic.
I'm upset about this, and I don't want to seize the means of production.
What you have to do is give that toaster a substantial extension cable so that it can seize the means of
But I
production.
don't even want toast.
I don't know how we got on this.
We should end it. I mean, the podcast.
And the revolution.
And the revolution. Well, you know, another attempt to meaningfully change the system comes to an end. If
The
you
see how it
Internet of
happens.
Things.
If you would like to send us a question or a grudge for a future episode, you can do so by emailing us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can also leave us a question on Twitter at crateandcrowbar. Funny videos are always lovely, but oh boy, is it difficult to get them into an audio format. If you would like to hang out on our Discord channel where our rad community hangs out, you can do so. The link for that is on our website, crateandcrowbar.com. And the Crate and Crowbar is very kindly supported by our Patreon backers who allow us to do this, some exciting side projects, some yet to be announced, one of which, the Miniatures podcast, is already happening. We've also got some cool guests lined up for the coming weeks' podcast voice as we finalise some arrangements, but that's all in the works. If you'd like to find out more about our Patreon, you can do so at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. You could also subscribe to our YouTube channel or leave us a review on iTunes or just press the thumbs up button on anything, anywhere. All of it helps.
Find a thumb and put it up.
To find someone in the street, make them do a thumbs up and then just tap it gently. We'll know. All of it. It's all good. That's how engagement works. We're engaging with you right now. And if you're engaged, why not engage with us by engaging with something? I don't know. I don't know how this works. I'm not very good at it, so I'm going to stop. If you'd like to follow us as individuals, you can do so. I'm Chris Thurston, and my Twitter handle is @CThurston, that's CTHURSTEN, Tom Senior.
I am at PCG Ludo, which is Ludo.
Pip.
Well, right. So I
Oh no.
am PHILIPPAWARR, but don't talk to my toaster. Don't want it having any ideas. I don't want it connecting with the Internet of Things. I don't want it hearing about other toasters. And I certainly don't want it seizing bread.
Leave Pip's woke toaster alone, Tom.
I am Pentadact. Pentadact.
It's amazing.